Welcome, everyone, to Through a Glass Darkly Radio on United Public Radio. The intro music was Mark of the Doomslayer by Carl Casey at White Bat Audio. And today, my guest is the ever-popular Grant Cameron. He is the recipient of the Leeds Conference International Researcher of the Year and the UFO Congress Researcher of the Year. He became involved in ufology as the Vietnam War ended in May 1975 with a personal sighting of a UFO. These sightings led to a decade of research into the early work done by the Canadian government into the flying saucer phenomena. From here, Cameron proceeded to do almost 3 decades of research into the role of the President of the United States in the UFO mystery. Welcome, Grant. It's always good to see you, my friend.
Well, thank you for having me, and thanks for your interest in what I'm doing.
All right, so it's been a long and lonely road, and it's been particularly choppy in the last several months with the publishing of the Arrow report, Nothing to See Here, Move Along, et cetera, et cetera. So what's going on with disclosure right now, Grant?
Well, it's the game that I see it as. They have control of the situation, and if you look at the disclosure of the Schumer amendment, the Rounds amendment, what you have is a situation where, as I pointed out, if the Democrats had won 6 more seats in the House, we would have disclosure today. The situation was that the Democrats controlled the president, they controlled the Senate, but they didn't control the House. And this guy from Wright-Patterson Air Force Base said, we're shutting her down. He got the House leader on his side, which makes it a vote on party vote. That you got to vote according to the way the House. Basically, it was over. Game over, set match. If the Democrats had won 6 more seats, all of that would have gone through. The guys would have had to give up all the material. They would have had the panel under the President of the United States that would appoint these people. They would have had subpoena power. It all would have happened. And yet, so now we've got this sort of idea where, oh, it was the Illuminati did it, and the contractors had nothing to do. If they had the controlled the House, they could have told this Taylor guy or whatever his name is, Mike Turner,
the coin-operated congrologist from Dayton,
to
Ohio.
Say, get lost. You have no power, get lost. But he's controlled the same as they controlled the armed services and the intelligence committee. And now
have you ever looked at his finances?
Well, it doesn't really matter his finances. I mean, he bought into the thing where he's going to protect this thing, and he's into national security. If you see what's going on now, Turner is now fighting to get financing for Ukraine, and because everybody else is against it, they've blocked it. And this is the whole thing in politics today. One guy can block the whole damn thing. If he's in the right position, he can block it. So basically nothing's getting done. And you have this situation where it is now worse than it was before. Because before it was sort of up in the air, like what was the rules? Now it's in the rules. It says they do not have to hand over their stuff. They do not have to, there's no subpoena power. There's no presidential committee. There's absolutely nothing. And there's nothing you can do about it. And it's written into law. The House signed it, the Senate signed it, and the president signed it. And this is now the law. They don't have to abide by this stuff. They can keep the material. And I always go to the thing, it's like, well, everybody sort of forgot, like, how did they get the material? And it's like, oh, they've got their own teams. Like, get out of here. They've got their own teams. They were given this material. This is how you got to realize how the game is played. The government contracts half of everything out. They don't do anything. They all the food service for the military is contracted out. I was at a university. It was the same thing. They're contracting everything out because you don't want to do the PR stuff. You want somebody else to deal with the people who are booking off sick and all the grievances and all that kind of stuff. So they contracted the stuff out to the contractors, and now they're in this box where the people all the big corporations who are controlling this, who have the money, who have the power, are damned if they're going to give it back. They're simply not going to. It's like saying to them, oh, they're going to suddenly start paying taxes. They'll say, yeah, okay, we'll start paying taxes. They're not going to pay taxes, and they're not going to give up this secret. They've got this material, and yet they think they're saving the world. They think that they're going to, in some ways, and they're right. that they're not going to give it to Putin, and they're not going to give it to the Chinese, and they're not going to give it to the North Koreans, and that they're not going to have people force their hand. So people say, no, we need to know this. We want this handout from these people to help us out, to give us material. And I say, be careful what you wish for, because what do you want? All the contractors, you where that is, where the legacy programs are, the names and the phone numbers of all the people working on the program, and all the Russians would be, know exactly where to go. And that's why these guys in the background are saying, we're not going to do this. And I keep pointing out that we had the highest level source that I'm aware of, except for Eric Davis. Eric Davis talked to 2 presidents about this whole UFO thing. But other than that, we had the highest level source there was. And that was Dr. Eric Walker. And this is 1989, 1990, 1991. I was sort of a head of a team of about 8 people who were trying to get him to talk. I didn't do the interviews. People would say, I can get him to talk. And so, okay, here's his phone number, here's his address, whatever. And people were getting him to talk. And he made this point. And this was the guy who, all the black stuff is run by DARPA. So DARPA was created by the Institute for Defense Analysis. It's the top military think tank for the U.S. military. Walker was chairman of the board when we were talking to him. He was chairman of the board. And we asked him this whole thing. And he said to us, and I put it to people, and nobody has the right answer. Nobody can reply and give him a legitimate answer. He said, why should we change the rules and the regulations to satisfy your curiosity? You're just curious, admit it. And then he said, so when you figure it out, what are you going to do with it? When the dog catches the car, what are you going to do? And most people don't have an answer. It's like, oh, well, we'd like to know. And it's like, no, this is the whole deal. They're saying we need to know this because there are billions or trillions of dollars in effect. And it's like, if you're a 1-star general, what do you want? I want to be a 2-star general. If you're a billionaire, what do you want? I want my next billion. I want my next billion. And everybody's still collecting stuff. It's this materialistic world where whoever's got the most toys when they die wins. And so they're not going to give this up. They're going to keep working this thing, and they're not going to hand it out. Number one, I think, because they really don't have the answers. People think they got this all figured out.
No, they don't know. They don't have a clue what they're doing. They have no idea. No idea.
But in everything, we don't. We make this assumption we're going to get disclosure, that somebody's going to give us the final answer. There is no final answer to everything. And the example I use now is I use the idea of an amoeba. People say, oh, it's an amoeba. It's just a single cell. We know all about it. It's all figured out or whatever. And you say, okay, an amoeba has 12 quadrillion atoms in it. That's 12 with 18 zeros after it. And so you say, well, if you take these 12 quadrillion atoms, throw them in a bowl, this amoeba is going to come crawling out. And then an amoeba has 670 billion base pairs. And we only have 3 billion base pairs in our DNA. And that is 11 or 12 quadrillion atoms will all go in the 3-dimensional spot at the right time and in the right place and recreate 670 billion base pairs without error. And we say, oh, this is just happening by accident. And there is no answer. The more you look at everything in nature, the more you look at everything, the more complex it gets. And I will guarantee it's the same thing with the UFO situation. Is from my experience, 1975, it was very simple. There was UFOs. They're coming from extraterrestrial planets. I remember the second night I'm looking at them going, hey, that's pretty cool. That's could be an extraterrestrial from another planet. That's a whole different world. There was like the calculations was big at the time it had started, but there really was no abductions. There was no channeling. There was no light language. There was no crop circles. There was no, the crash stuff. Nobody believed the crash stuff. The Roswell thing, people don't realize the Roswell story didn't break till 1980, till Bill Moore. The world has changed and it's gotten more complex and more complex and more complex. And now we're starting to realize this non-locality and spooky action at distance and all this kind of stuff. And that's what I say is that we think that somebody's got this UFO thing all figured out. They may know a little bit about what's going on, but I guarantee you, the more you look at this thing, the more complex it's going to get. And you take a look at the examples of I wrote the book, Alien Sky Pilots, UFO Sky Pilots, where you look at these people where on the ground, where people go into the craft and it's 30 feet on the outside and the inside, it's the size of a football stadium. And people think that we have that understood. There's absolutely no way. Or some of the stories that you can do now with UFO experiencers, and now it's actually I'm going to interview a guy on comas, that people who are in deep comas, that they have these experiences, these very dramatic. And a friend of mine had this. My best friend His wife had one of these. She had H1N1 for 16 days. She was in a coma. She came out talking these horror stories of what happened when she was in coma of this event. And people will say it wasn't an illusion. It wasn't an imagination. This actually happened to me. And they would tell these bizarre stories about living for 70 years and having 3 kids and events more real than the real world. And then you start to realize this world is very, very complex, and it's not a very simple thing that it's going to be extraterrestrials. In fact, I would maintain the more I look at it, the more I don't think it's extraterrestrial. The more it looks more complex and more complex and more complex. And that's what I think the people got to realize when it comes to the disclosure thing. It's not like they're going to put it on the table and say they're coming from Zeta Reticuli. Jim Semivan points that out.
Yeah, I don't think they know. I don't think they know where they come from.
Yeah,
they constantly say that they lie. They
bodies crafts doesn't mean you know where they're coming from, unless it's got some sort of driver's license from Zeta Reticuli in their pockets, and they don't even have clothes, and they don't breathe, and they don't eat, and they don't drink, and you start wondering, like, what is this, a biological being? Like, what's going on? How can they go through walls and stuff like that? And it just gets more complex and more complex and more complex. And that's why I say, like, the way I look at it, it's going to be a lot less physical than people think it is. It's going to be a lot more psychic or spiritual than people think. It's going to be at least 1,000 times more complex than people think, and it won't have a hint of capitalism. This is what I would conclude as to what I see. And to me, the important people are the people that are interacting with it. And then you start seeing how weird and how unbelievable it is. Even this idea, like I mentioned to you, that there's a new move to from very high level people to put out a thing. And they're talking about 5 extraterrestrial races. And when I see that, I go, are you kidding me? 5 extraterrestrial races? like what happened to Mission Rama aliens? What happened to Chris Bledsoe's aliens? I mean, there's thousands and thousands of on record. I remember the guy who was doing the humanoids. I can't remember his name. He was doing the humanoid thing. I remember asking him, he had 20,000 cases of humanoids. I said, how many distinct type of aliens do you think there are? And he said, they didn't count. He said, but way more than 1,000. It's the idea that this thing just gets more complex and more complex and more complex.
I think Steve Mera says that of like just gods and godlings as an example, there are like 12, or even craft and encounters. There's like 12 million that they've counted. 12 million.
Yeah. Or you even take a look at Lukatsky, who said something very important. When Lukatsky was interviewed by Corbell and Knapp, he said, we've got 200,000 cases in the database. And he said, it's like driving down the LA freeway and every single car is different. He said, they're all different. And when I heard that, I went back and I looked at the data from my Sky Pilot. People have flown, and I had 36 people, plus later on, Whitley Strieber and other people came on and said that they'd had this experience, whatever. Everybody did the same thing. So the craft was alive. They touched something on the craft. They became one with the craft, whatever they thought was what the craft did. And the beings would say, imagine it in your mind. It's the old idea, like an out-of-body experience. You got to go within to go without. You got to go within your mind, imagine it. And when you can imagine it, push the button or whatever. But nobody did the same thing. One person touched a panel on a wall. One person put their fingers in the end of a chair. One had a ball. They put their hand on a ball. Chris Bledsoe put his hand on a beehive in the middle of the thing. Nobody did the same thing. And this is the whole thing, that all the sightings are different. And then you start realizing that this is true. Like at Skinwalker Ranch. Colm Kelleher tells a story. They've got the Gen 3 glasses, these researchers or whatever. He doesn't identify who these people are. They're sitting there and they're waiting, and suddenly this thing comes over the ridge and flies right by them. And they're all sitting in their Gen 3 glasses and they watch this thing fly by. End of the night, they all compare notes and they all saw something different. And then you start realizing, like, what's going on here? Or Kit Green, who points out that people who see the same, are in the same experience, see the same being, and they, depending on what you believe, they see 2 different beings. And this is this idea that consciousness is a big part of this thing, and that this phenomena can change the consciousness. It can change the way they present. Or people will say, oh, no, it's definitely extraterrestrial. I mean, come on, it's extraterrestrial. And I say, seriously, do you honestly believe that in 1896 and 1897, that these guys with beards and hanging down off of ropes with wooden ships and propellers, that they flew through the vacuum of space from Mars? You simply believe that's happening? And I remember the Canadians, when I was dealing with the Canadians when I first started, I was dealing with the Canadian government researchers, the guys, the inside guys, they called them the inner circle, around Wilbur Smith, who ran the Canadian government program. And I remember the metallurgist who was handling all the metal. I asked him, how much metal did you handle? He said, tons of it. It was all coming from the States. It was being sent by the U.S. Air Force for the Canadians to analyze. And then he said to me, he wanted to point out, he said, They were dealing with an alien by the name of Alpha. There's actually three: Ponar, Tyla, and Alpha. And Alpha was the main alien. And I remember he pointed out one time, he said, Grant, let me point out something very clearly to you. At no time did Wilbur Smith and I ever believe that Alpha was from Uranus. Don't ever get that in your mind. We never believed it was from Uranus. And Uranus, the alien was saying on Uranus, which is like 325 degrees Celsius below zero, there was 500 million people, and there was just like Earth. And so you start to see that all fades away, and that the beings are making up these stories. Or like a being will come, somebody will say, hey, where are you from? And the being will say, you wouldn't understand. Okay, so if it's an extraterrestrial and you're from some planet, like what's so hard to understand? And then you start to see that they're playing around. Or Sherry Wilde, who had the very the top-selling book, The Forgotten Promise, where she goes and the being says, this gray being is Zeta, comes to her and says he's from Andromeda. And then she puts in to the publisher, and the publisher said, hey, she said he is from Andromeda. And she said, yeah, he's from Andromeda. He can't be from Andromeda. He's a gray. Didn't you say he was a Zeta? He said, yeah, he's a Zeta. And he said, well, then he's got to be from Zeta Reticuli. And so, she said, really? And he said, yeah, go back and ask him what's going on. So next time Doc comes, she says to him, so what's going on here? Are you actually an alien? And he goes, well, no, that would not best describe who I actually am. I am an etheric being on a mission in the cosmos for the creator. And I remember going to these two beings they called themselves Chants, carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, from England. And there's these two women that were in contact with these beings. And then the one woman who was doing the channeling part, the other woman could see it and can communicate with it, but the one is doing the channeling. And she says, oh, they want you to interview them. I said, oh, great. So I go there. And of course, the first question I say to them is, I say, hey, so are you extraterrestrials? And then they say, would you like us to be extraterrestrials? We could do that if you want. But no, we're not extraterrestrials. We've always been here. You're the visitor. And that's the whole key, is when you see the complexity of this whole thing, you take a look at the spooky action at a distance, this whole idea, the 2022 Nobel Prize for spooky action at a distance, and this whole idea that there may not be any time and space. And people go, yeah, I understand that there may not be time and space, there may be conscious creations of the mind or whatever. And then you say, okay, so how big is the universe? If there's no time and space, how big is the universe? Or these people who have these experiences, like in comas or near-death experience, or DMT, where they say, I lived 1,000 years. I was 1,000 years, and they're only gone for 10 minutes. Then if that's true, then how big is the universe? It may all just be a singularity here now. And the whole idea where the being says, go within yourself. And when you can imagine it, then we'll go there. And Ron Johnson said, he's outside the Milky Way, like 50 to 70,000 light years in 1 second. And that's the whole deal. Is he actually going 50 to 70,000 light years, or is there no time and space? It's all one thing. And so to me, the more I look at it, the more complex the whole thing gets. And anybody that thinks that they've got to figure it out, especially if they're really compartmentalized, and if they're really materialistic, where they're trying to, do the whole measure and weigh and all this kind of stuff, and that if we got a piece of metal, we're going to be able to build a flying saucer. There was even some beings, I think many years ago, that said the technology thing is a trap, that this is a trap, that if you get into this whole thing, you're not going anywhere. And that the thing is going to be much more esoteric and psychic, and have all these components that it may not be, they're appearing as whatever they want to appear, and that we're perceiving, and that almost everything that we perceive is going to end up being wrong. We thought the world was flat because it looked like it was flat. We thought the sun went around the earth because it looked like it went around the earth. We thought that the world didn't rotate because we can't feel anything rotating, and we're actually rotating, and we're going through the around the sun, and then the sun is going through the Milky Way, and then the Milky Way, the galaxy is going, and the more we look at it, the more we realize that everything that we perceive is probably going to be wrong. There is no time, there is no space, things aren't solid, and all. I remember the story of Jacques Vallée trying to explain to someone, getting really upset and banging the table and saying, "This is not solid." You got to get to this bottom line of ufology and realize how does reality actually work, rather than just looking at the story and making up a story based upon what people are reporting. Because you take a look, and if all UFO sightings are different, that is big news in terms of, and Lakatsky confirmed this idea that inside the craft, that the UAP phenomena, he says, we discovered is a combination of physical and psychic material. And nobody even listened to him. All they wanted to know was, wow, what's inside the craft? How did you get inside the craft? How big is the craft and stuff? And he was cut off during the interview. And he basically said, if I told you that, the rest of it would seem primitive. And this is the whole deal. Like, they're holding this stuff back in terms of telling the Russians or the Chinese what's inside the craft, how they think it works, and this stuff that will just blow away reality, that you haven't got a clue how reality works. If the craft is bigger on the inside than it is on the outside, even on the ground, we got a problem with how the world actually works.
Now, what do you think? Why do you think they're holding this back? It's because they just don't know
money. Well, I've mentioned, if you've done the interview with Diane Pasulka, ask her. Tim Taylor, the NASA engineer who was around Chris Bledsoe, who I talked to at one point in 2013. I heard the figure. He had 40 inventions. He was getting these all medical inventions from the beings. He had this protocol where he could contact and interact with the beings. And the one was like absolute major money for one. And this is the one he told me about, where he said, Grant, he said the morning I got that idea in my head, the one that they put on the space shuttle, he said, that idea, he said, the last thing I remember the night before was a hooded figure standing at the end of the bed. And I said, really? Could you see its face? He said, no, I couldn't see its face. And I said, you should go to Yvonne Smith and get regressed. And he said, well, maybe I'll do that and stuff like that. But that's the whole thing. That was major money. And plus the national security. Like I say, everybody thinks they're saving the world. Everybody thinks it's like the idea. It's like, I'm the good guy, you're the bad guy. And that's what we do. We do the separation game. We do the separation game where, in fact, we should be playing the game like everybody's trying to get to the end result. And you believe one thing, I believe one thing. And in the end, it's all going to work out okay. It's as Nick Cook's wife said, and I've had experiences with all sorts of people. Whether it's near-death experience or in float tanks. Nick's wife's experience was with her mother, a shared near-death experience where people say, I got the vision where everything was absolutely perfect. Everything's exactly the way it's supposed to be. But we have this idea of the good guys and the bad guys, and they think that's what we've got to remember is they think they're saving the world. So it's like it's all about weapons. So it's we don't want to give it to the Russians. If the Russians get this, they're going to destroy us with this kind of stuff. And so if you're a weapons guy, it's all about weapons. If you're into money, it's all about money. If you're in corporations, it's about the stock guys and paying, getting bonuses and stuff like that. So it's all going to come down to everybody's playing the game to win, because that's the way our society is built. It's not about let's all work together. It's about competition, my team versus your team. And people can justify a million reasons. I wrote an article in 2009, the 64 reasons they've decided not to tell you the truth. And you start looking, and there's a lot of reasons why people think, well, we can't tell the people this, we can't tell the people that, and you can justify it. And that's what happened with the Schumer amendment. If you take a look, you had the president, it went to the president, and take a look at what the president said. It said, yes, I realize that I have the responsibility to report to Congress about things, the programs and the spending, but there is national security implications here. So his whole thing was there's national security implications on this whole thing. We don't want to give it to the Russians. We're on this thing where you can get inside people's heads, especially if you look at Skinwalker Ranch, the slide 9 at Skinwalker Ranch. What was slide 9 about? It was about all the things that they were looking at. How do you put 4 bulls inside a trailer through metal? How do you mutilate a cow when someone's standing like 50 feet away and doesn't see what's happening? How do you get in these special forces guys' heads and tell them, leave, you are not welcome? And they're going like, wow, man, if we could get this kind of stuff. And when the story about the portal, when that portal opened and the DIA people came in there and the Skinwalker Ranch people were told to back off and they went in there after this portal opened, that's the whole thing where they're looking at this as technology, as a potential way to work. The same as when they heard I was going to Skinwalker Ranch, Pandolfi and the boys, they wanted to send one of his assistants, Kevin Albert. Kevin Albert was going to come to Shasta because we were doing these stories that that the Mission Rama people were able to open these, what they call Zendras, these portals. And they wanted Kevin Albert, who claimed to me that he'd been through a portal. And then I remember in 2020, there was another portal that was opened by some Latino people. There were 7 of them who were levitated into the air, and there was hundreds of beings around them in this 2020. And I went back to Kevin Albert and I said, okay, Kevin, they've had another portal open at Mount Shasta. I said, I've got all the people. There's 9 people. I've interviewed 3 of them on camera, and there's 9 people. I know who they are. And I said, isn't it about time you told me what the CIA knows about portals? Because that's one of the things I think they do understand. They understand this component, that it's this, that they can move in and out of time and space. And the government may have this time travel thing. Maybe
did this start with John? Did this start with Parsons? Do you think the portal that they opened up in?
Well, that's the thing. It's all the combination of all the stuff. But I mean, the story was, and I got Ron Pandolfi on camera. The only time he's ever been caught on camera, he put on his wife's YouTube channel. I grabbed it, and he was very upset that I took it off there. But I mean, why would I not take it off there? And that's YouTube. When his wife said, like, Footman, what do you say? And that's when he said, people have always wondered what it's like to go in the next world. Next time John, his assistant beside him, not assistant, but John Sullison, his friend, sitting beside him. Next time John goes to the desert, a number of us here will go into the next world and come back again. And this story is being pushed again. This story, I think there's some truth to this. Now there's another story that's about to happen. I can't talk too much about it. But this story seems to be true, that they seem to have some ability to do it. So when they had the whole thing with Tim Taylor giving me that thing with the Hughes aircraft bill, where he shows me these photographs, these 2 guys flying through space on this painting. And Tim Taylor says to me, what do you think of this? He always does that. He doesn't tell you anything. He asks you, what do you think about this? And I said, I have no idea, Tim. I don't know what this is about. And then he shows me another photograph of these balls all going down this tunnel. And then he shows me this eclipse and 3 different things, these big screens of outer space. Then this postcard in the backseat of a car where it says, is this guy saying to his girlfriend, I wish I could travel through time and space to be with you, or some sort of thing. I can't remember, because I wasn't paying attention when he told me the story. And then I said, I don't know what you're talking about, Tim. I have no idea what this is about. And he's showing me these things on his cell phone. And that's when he says, you know where that is? I said, no, I don't know where it is. So that's a Hughes aircraft building. So I still don't know what you're talking about, Chris. Tim, I have no idea. And he said, you know where that was where I know where he said, I'm not sure exactly the language, where they said that's where the jump room was, or that's where the rumor jump room was supposed to have been, or whatever. And I'm going, really? Let me go to those photographs again. And he shows me this photograph. And then I said, next time I go into Hughes aircraft, LAX, it's right outside of LAX. Next time I go to LA, I'm going to this building. And he said, well, watch out for the guard. And he told me there's this guard there. Make sure, watch out for the guard. And then I went and I actually phoned up the guy with the jump room. His name always escapes me, Andrew Basiago. I phoned him up and I said, hey, Andy, were you in the front building or the back building? Because there's 2 buildings. It's 999 Sepulveda Avenue for anybody that wants to go there in LA. And I said, were you in the front building or the back building when you're doing this jump room thing, going to Mars with Obama and stuff? And he said, I don't know. I was a young kid. I don't remember if I was in the front building or the back building. Because what Tim told me was, you know where the painting is with these 2 guys flying through space? You know where that is? And I said, no, where is it? He said, it's right outside the elevator. And I said, really? It's outside. And he's sort of hinting. And then years later, it sort of like occurred to me. It's like, hey, why was Tim at the building? I mean, if this is all garbage, what's he doing at the Hughes aircraft building checking this out? There must be some truth to it. Otherwise, Tim wouldn't have gone there. He was checking, is this real? I mean, stuff like that. And so that's the way I look at it. It just gets more complex. And I still say it's like the Super Bowl. Like I'm writing a book now called, I was going to call it the Super Bowl. And then someone told me, some PR guy told me I'd probably get sued if I did it. So I'm calling it the big game. And this is the Super Bowl. This is, if you start to understand what's going on here, this is a revelation. This is the shattering of naive reality. Whatever paranormal phenomena you're looking at, what the phenomena is doing is it's shattering your naive reality. You think the world is flat. You think the world is solid. And they're going, no, watch this. And then you start thinking, and the way science advances is through awe and curiosity. When you're in curiosity or awe, then you do experiments. As long as you think you got it all figured out, you're not going to do any scientific experiments. So that's what they're doing. And that's what like guys like Gary Nolan said. I'm not interested in the 95% that falls within the bell curve. I'm interested in the 5% outside the bell curve. And he talks about when somebody's doing a dissertation, he says, hey, what's that? Why is that thing off the bell curve there? What's going on there? And that's what he said. That's where the Nobel Prizes are. The things that don't fit in the bell curve, that's the stuff you got to look at. The paranormal phenomena is telling us it's not the world you think it is. So I think in the end, the phenomena is, as Jim Semivan said, when they asked Jim Semivan, who's running the show? He said, they are.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when he said, I don't think there's any dots to connect. There does not appear to be any there. And that sort of gives you and he actually states that he got the briefing, he got the classified briefing, and that he knows where the legacy programs are, and he's not going to talk about it. So he knows a fair bit about what's going on here. And he says, I don't think there's any there. I don't think I will ever understand this in my lifetime. And so anybody who thinks that there's a solid answer, that they've got this all figured out and they're flying the crafts to other star systems, I don't think so. I think that they're, as the story was, the core story, we're being interacted by some sort of intelligence. We've got hardware and bodies, and we can't figure this thing out.
Yeah, I think it's almost like a great filter to steal concept, right? In the sense that I think the only way we break this open is if we apply the collective intelligence of humanity in solving it. And right now we're stunted because these people who think that they're somehow smarter, somehow better informed than the rest of humanity are deluding themselves. I guarantee somebody they would never expect, you allow them to interface with some of this data, and they might take this thing to the next level. But until you allow the broader base of humanity to participate, then they're just going to be stuck in these programs with limited thinking and kind of not getting any further. And like I said, I think I told you before the broadcast, Grant, I think this is something we all need to just ignore the government and just kind of figure out on our own, and then just try to crowdsource the answer, because we're never going to get it from them. And if it's dangerous in doing it, so be it. The core function of the government just is to protect us, but by not sharing this reality with us, they by definition are not protecting us. So we just have to kind of figure it out on our own.
But they would disagree with you. They'd say you don't need the launch codes to the nukes, and you don't need to know how many nukes there are. And then that's what happens. You got a $900 billion defense budget. You basically are saying, right, we need all these weapons because we've got all these enemies around the world, and we've allowed these people to have these budgets and to hand over security to them and say, we have all these enemies and believe all this stuff. And when you do that, then how do you, it's like the warning from Eisenhower, beware the military industrial congressional complex. And they took out the word congressional because they didn't want to offend Congress. That's exactly what we've got now. We've got everybody with their hand in the cookie jar. Everybody's making money, and you can't stop it. It just circles around. How do you turn around? It's like we can say, we want the UFO story told. We also want the $900 billion defense budget shut down. Neither is going to happen. There's no way. We are in control. That's what Walker said to us. You're never going to be given the answer. Give it up. Leave it alone. That's what he told us. You're never going to be told. And that's the thing. They figure they've got the thing and they're in control of it, and they're not going to pay taxes. They're not going to give the information out. They see themselves as saving the world. They're trying to do whatever. And you have a second level. It's not just the because people always use the word the government. I always say, what do you mean by the government? There is really no government. It's like when I worked at the university, I always say to people, if you think that somebody in the government knows what's going on, forget it, because I was at the University of Manitoba, and I had the keys to everything. I had the keys to the president's office, 8 vice president's offices, human resources, payroll. I had keys to everything. And if you think I knew what was going on, why would I leave 6 months before a major buyout that I lost hundreds of thousands of dollars by not sticking around? And that's the whole thing, is that there's a certain number of people, yes, that may have pieces of the puzzle, but you have a second level that people always sort of forget as well, is you have guys like all these scientific, like Puthoff and Eric Davis and Kit Green and all these guys, and the supposedly the group's over 50 people now, and they're all going to sit in the background as well, and they aren't going to say anything either because they're waiting for the patent. They know how much money Tim Taylor made from his, and even the biologics. I heard that the amount of money that these biologics are worth for if they've got alien tissue, in terms of getting the patents on all this kind of stuff, is just immense, and they're not going to give it up. So everybody's sitting there, and everybody's trying to get 3 houses and 5 cars and all this kind of stuff. Everybody's playing the same game. Is I'm not going to give it up to somebody else. I need more, and I'm going to control. So you have a level of military or whoever controls it, or contractors, and then you have the scientists under them who who, as I said, I mean, if I had not released the Wilson leak document, if I had not released the Oak Shannon notes for the Advanced Physics Theoretical Working Group and the alien autopsy document, we'd still be back 10 years ago. There was a pile of researchers who were sitting on these documents. They all had the documents, and they didn't do anything because they're all waiting. And that's the whole thing. There was this supposed story told about Hal Puthoff, where Hal Puthoff has said, was asked, could you tell who the 12 guys who are probably running it? And Hal said, yeah, I could probably guess who they are. And then the question was, well, why don't you tell? And he said, well, it's because you'd go to the New York Times. The New York Times would write the story, and then I would have to deny it, and then nobody would ever talk to me again. And that's a key thing that people don't realize. If you are a guy who has a piece of the puzzle, like Eric Davis, when that memo leaked, he was called intelligence blowback. Suddenly it was like, oh, Eric Davis can't keep his mouth shut. He leaked this document. He shouldn't have been keeping notes. And now, holy shit, everything, it's all unraveling, and we got to move all the factories and move all the equipment. And that's what they're worried about. So everybody's trying to keep it quiet because Hal Puthoff's still trying to figure it out as well. So if he talks, if Eric Davis talks, if all these guys talk, well, then nobody's going to talk to them because they're talking about the people. Same as if you go to the congressman Burchett. So Burchett's saying, we put everything on the table. This is bullshit. Let's put everything on the table. And then they say, well, did you get anything in the briefings when you went in the briefings that we really don't know? And he said, yeah. And he said, well, what did they tell you? And he said, well, I can't say. National security. And they may be trying to.
That's how they get you. That's how they get you, right?
But he's playing the same game. He's saying we want you to release the stuff, but when it comes to me talking, I'm going to play the national security game. And the national security guys say, to hell with you. We're playing the national security game. We're not about to release it either. If you're not going to release it, and so everybody's afraid of the national security thing, they're playing the game. So we're patriotic Americans, and we're not going to release the stuff. That's why I'm always hesitant of whistleblowers. And the first thing you should say, if some guy comes and says, I've got the answer and I'm going to give you this stuff, your first question is, why the hell are you not in jail? There's no way. If this is the most highly classified secret in the United States, you are going to be in jail. There's no way people are walking around with the secret. What you're getting is people who are putting what, because that's what the story was told, that Semivan told Chris Bledsoe. If we wanted you dead, you would have been dead 10 years ago. We don't do that anymore. But what they do now is when you want to discredit a story is you just put mud in the water. You put a bunch of stories in there so nobody knows which story is true, which story is not true. And the example I always show is I was told the Hall-Minter First Base film took place in May of 1971. And Bob Emmenegger had a lot of details. It was 6 o'clock in the morning. There was 4 TV crews going on. There was named the CIA guy that was running the operation. He was on the base. He was allowed to go and look at the hangar where they supposedly kept the craft. And Shartle, who was his guy, was telling him what the film was. He had the film in his hands, all this kind of stuff. So he says May of 1971. And then Richard Doty says, oh no, it was April or whatever of 1964. So then there's 2 different stories. So Linda Howe's telling one story, I'm telling another story, and suddenly it's like, well, who's bullshitting? Is it Grant bullshitting, or is it Linda Howe? And you get these 2 different stories, and then everybody goes, I know what's going on. And it's like, that story's probably not real. And everybody just goes on to the next story because you can't really get any concrete details. And that's what I think they do now is they just put stuff they discredit people by putting stuff out, and nobody knows what to believe. And you get 100 stories and 100 whistleblowers, and nobody knows where to go and who to believe.
Yeah, I think you have to just get direct experience because I agree with you. They're never going to release any of the details of the secret.
Yeah,
and
that's what I think.
Like I said,
the experiences are important. That's you go to the people who are interacting with the phenomena. Like a lot of people are still like, even when you get this thing where we're now with the arrow, or now we're gonna get these cameras around the world to get stuff. And if Lakatsky's right and every UFO sighting is different, what's the point? Like, what's the point of counting red ones and green ones and fast ones and slow ones and circles and eggs and saucers? And it's a total waste of time. Because what it basically comes down to is they can morph. They can appear as whatever you want. It's like the beings. When I talk to these beings, they said, would you like us to be extraterrestrial? We could do that if you want. They can
plus the sophisticated cameras are a national security non-starter to begin with. Right? Could you imagine you take Avi Loeb, he's setting up all these UFO detectors, wants to do it across the United States. He's associated with Israel, right? So not only are you going to see UFOs, you're also going to have radar returns on U.S. national security assets, right? Flying around times and things like that. So like that even on that level, it's a non-starter, and it's legitimately a non-starter. So, like I said, if we hope to make any progress on this, we just have to ignore the national security state and kind of get our own data. And then, of course, they'll try to infiltrate and do what they do, but fine, whatever you're going to do. But as long as you have your own hard evidence and are able to convince yourself, then, you can make use of it as you may.
And then once you start doing that, then it all changes. Then it's not ETs anymore. Then it comes to this theory, nature of reality type thing, where what are we really looking at here? And this goes to the whole idea of Seth, where it can really destroy your worldview. You manifest everything around you. There is no other rule. This whole idea that what you are seeing around you, you are creating. And that is so far down the rabbit hole as people go, absolutely not. And that, I think, is where we're going. That's where we're headed, is this idea, the idea that you can go into an ayahuasca experience and you can interact with these entities, and that there's all these levels of reality, and whatever your resonate is what you experience. So if you're at a low level, you're going to resonate with a gray. If you're like the Mission Rama people and you're doing praying and meditating and oming and stuff, you got these aliens with long hair out of the Bible and, like muscular and just beautiful beings and stuff like that. And this is this whole idea that it starts to be this idea that we are creating reality around us. And that is something which I don't think the world's ready for. I mean, you get a lot of the channelers saying that whole idea that you are creating your reality billions of times a second. You're going from reality to reality and stuff like that. And people, it's just so far beyond. And I think the government may understand some of that, but it's still.
The government has a term for that. It's called panpsychic collapse, right?
Yeah.
And the conceit would be if everybody suddenly realized that their thoughts are creating everything they see around them. You could have some, once people start figuring that out, you might have some bad thoughts, and they start to metastasize and turn in kind of dark directions. And again, this is the way the government may view it. But of course, they're not smarter than anybody else, but they have this conceit that they are. And I think that's, again, part of the problem. I think, like I said, the only way we're going to get out of this is, like, as you said, talking to experiencers and trying to experience this stuff on our own. And then if the government shows up at your house, then you just say, look, you said it doesn't exist, so nothing to see here. Why don't you just move along?
Yeah, they've never contacted me. People always have this thing about the government's going to do whatever. I have 50 years. I've never had a threat. I got threatened by a UFO researcher, but never by the government, and never encountered. And I mean, I dealt with the president. I had the conversation with Dick Cheney, and I dealt with Eric Walker, the head of the biggest military think tank, and stuff like that. And I just think that they may want you to think that. They may sort of move you off, but I think that's sort of overblown in terms. In fact, that's what Lukatsky said. He says we actually confirmed that there are men in black, the real guys, them. The men in black.
So not government employees, but something else.
And the beings. But he said they're using reverse psychology, and that's what I say. They're using reverse psychology. They're not trying to scare you off. They're trying to drag you in. It's all about this, what I call the theory of wow, where they're dragging you down the rabbit hole and you can't get out of the rabbit hole, where you're trying to figure out, like, what the heck happened? How did that happen? And awe and curiosity come in, and you start to explore. That's what they want you to do. That's when I have this thing with the black helicopters. So people, I deal with a lot of experiences. So they do the black helicopters thing. And then I say, got any photographs of black helicopters? And you start showing me the photographs of the black helicopters, and they have the orb in the black. Has anybody got a black helicopter photo close up? It doesn't have an orb in it. And you start wondering, like, the black helicopter, they're not trying to scare you. How does the government know that you had an experience the morning after this black helicopter? Because it gets the person down the rabbit hole, and the person's trying to figure out, they're petrified, but they're trying to figure out what's going on, and they get dragged into it. And that's what they're doing. To me, it's all reverse psychology. It's like, I call it the Jesus circus, where what the phenomena is doing, it's creating all these bizarre events. And you get, like Jesus, you got to walk on water. You got to feed 5,000 people. You got to raise Lazarus from the dead. And then when you've done the circus and you got everybody's attention, then you deliver the message. But you don't deliver the message first, because that's what we do. We go into another country. We say, we're here to bring you freedom and democracy, Jesus and McDonald's. And they go, get the hell out of our country. They point a gun and say, get out of here. And that's what we do. We use left brain thinking, where we're doing it by language, by lectures and stuff. They're doing right brain thinking. They're doing the thing with images, why they don't give you a straight answer. It's all these images, and you're trying to figure out the images. They're appealing to the right brain. And the idea is to get out of the left brain into the right brain, to talk to people who have gotten into the field through hypnosis, psychedelics, all these different modalities. And these people will start, and you start to see these common phenomena, like people on the board of the craft. They say, when it's on there, I could see 360 degrees, and I go, hey, that's out of body experience. Seeing the 360 degrees, going through walls, that's out of body experience. And you start, and then with the big one that was the big crossover that really nailed it for me was Ron Johnson, the experiencer out of Utah, the Mormon guy. Mm-hmm. So Ron says the alien takes Elby, and everybody always has one alien. So then you start wondering, is this actually an alien or is it a spirit guide? And so the alien, his alien is named Elby. And Elby takes him to the spirit world, and he's with his mother in the spirit world. And then he says there's this building. It looks like a small Mormon temple. And his mother says, Ron, when you die, you're going to get a room in this building. And she says, let's go in the building. And he says, I go into this that looks like a Mormon temple with his mother. And he said, it's grand. He says, it's like 10 to 100 times the size inside as it is outside. And I go, hey, is he in a Mormon temple in the spirit world, or is he in a UFO? That's what the UFO people say. It's 100 times the size inside. And then she shows him the crystals. You look at the certain degree, the certain angle in the crystal, and you can see the past of your life. And he looks at his dog crystal, and he sees his dog in 1972 that disappears. And he realizes his neighbor shot the dog, threw it in the back of a pickup, and took it to the junkyard and threw it in the junkyard. And then he has these crystals. And then you go to UFO Cover Up Live, where Richard Doty, playing the Falcon, says the most amazing thing he saw, and he shows the alien with the crystal. And according to Linda Howe, the crystal, they actually showed the crucifixion of Jesus to the American government, this crystal where you can see the past lives. And then you go into Life Between Lives, Michael Newton, and they're looking in the crystal, and they're looking to plan their next life through this crystal. And you start realizing, hey, there's these crossovers between all these different phenomena. And as Ray Hernandez said, when he got taken out of his car on the freeway in Miami and brought up, and they're showing this wheel, and the wheel is spinning, and there's these images of remote viewing and psychic phenomena and ghosts and UFOs and stuff. And the wheel is spinning, and these beings say to him, it's quit parsing it. You need to quit parsing it. It's all the same thing. And that's when you start to realize, hey, you got to look at all these paranormal phenomena, and you start to realize there's all these bizarre crossovers between one phenomena and another. Orbs appear in seances. They appear in experiencers. They appear, all over the place in different phenomena. And the beings will appear. The aliens will appear in seances. They'll come out in seances, or dead people will appear on the ship, dead dogs and stuff. And you start realizing, holy cow, there's all these crossovers. And I think all they're doing is they're raising consciousness, where people talk about it and nobody figures it out. They don't want, even the phenomena is playing this game, but they don't want you to figure it out. They just want you to think about it. And as we go, people start to realize, hey, maybe it's not a physical world. Maybe this non-locality is right. And as we go up, it gets more and more. And that's what Max Planck says. You do not convince. You do not win your opponent by convincing him that you're right. Your science advances like one funeral at a time. Your opponents die, and the next generation is not offended with the idea. So you can look at the new generation, the young kids, and you say, hey, do you believe it? Is there near-death experiences? Oh yeah, we know about that. UFOs, yeah, we know about that. Area 51, yeah, we know about that. We didn't know about that when we were kids, and it's now common. You can go to the farthest jungles of Africa or into the depths of China and say Area 51. Oh, I know what that is. Yeah, Area 51. It's that consciousness is there, and people accept the fact. They may not believe there's near-death experiences, but they know what a near-death experience is. They have these things, and the old people die off, and the young generation, it's like, oh yeah, the alternate realities, the blue pill, the red pill, and stuff like that. That's where they're raising the consciousness, that we get to a point where, as I said, in when I started in 1975, it was a completely different world. And people cannot imagine how different it was. It was so simple. It was extraterrestrials. It was flying saucers. And then you go through the years, and you end up with a world that is completely different, where kids are accustomed to the fact that there's all these paranormal phenomena and stuff like that with the movies and stuff like that. And when 2017 came, I said, and I'd written in this 2009 article, 64 reasons they've decided not to tell you the truth. I said, they're never going to admit there's a UFO study. Never, never. And then 2017, suddenly it was the New York Times said, oh yeah, the government's investigating UFOs. And then people, because Stephen Greer, and I take a Stephen Greer's argument and other people's argument, people are going to jump off a bridge, the stock market's going to melt down, people are going to realize oil's not worth anything and stuff. And what happened in 2017? Absolutely nothing. Nobody jumped off a bridge. Everybody went, yeah, I know there's UFOs. I knew they're investigating UFOs. And it's that sort of thing where it's like, when did gay marriage happen? Go, I don't know, it was like 20 years, 30 years. It just happens and nobody, it sort of flips, but nobody realizes it's flipped. That's what's going to happen is everybody's going to, if you go to people today, young people say, do they have crafts? Yeah, they got crafts. We can't prove it, but yeah, that is in the zeitgeist now with the young people. They know there's crafts, there's bodies. They may believe they're extraterrestrials, but this is common knowledge. And they will work on it, but they won't be offended. That's what's blocking it, is the people who have the old ideas who block it for whatever reason, that the young generation is going to come up and they're going to, the consciousness will just rise to the point where everybody knows sort of what's going on.
Now, if you're just joining us, you are listening to Through a Glass Darkly Radio on the United Public Radio. And I'm here with Grant Cameron. All right, so we're kind of muddying through all this disclosure stuff. Are they going to say something? Are they not? Blah, blah, blah. What can the individual citizen do, not related vis-a-vis government, but just vis-a-vis the phenomena? Like, in other words, why hasn't the phenomena come out and disclosed itself?
Well, it's the same reason that you can't come in and say, we're here to bring you freedom, democracy, Jesus, and McDonald's. They're not going to come and do their work for it. So you got to look at the bottom line is it gets mystical. Remember who you actually are. You are not the puppet on the stage. People think I played King Henry VIII in grade 12. I'm now King Henry VIII. You are not King Henry VIII. You played King Henry VIII. And this is the whole idea, is if you realize who you actually are, then you get into the whole zeitgeist idea of reincarnation, which is now generally accepted. Everybody knows, the reincarnation cases and all the sort of literature. They may not believe it or whatever, but that's the big deal. So if you're coming in on multiple lives, you came in to do something. You probably came in here. It's not a random thing. You just agreed to do something. You were going to work on some sort of issue or whatever. And then you get in the situation where you have a job to do. So people have to realize who am I? Why did I come here? And what am I supposed to be doing? And the UFO people, you and I, you start looking at things as being not that random, where you have a situation where you and I may have agreed before we came in to play this whole role, to do this kind of stuff, that you're going to do this, I'm going to do this. And that we have this, one of the books I'm reading is called Center Stage, where I go through one of the ideas that Seth had was this idea of period plays. And this is this idea that things are not happening randomly like people think, that you come in to have an individual role to play in the world, but you also come in as groups. So there was people who came in as groups to bring in LSD. They came in to invent the computer, who came into because there's all these weird things that happen. For example, the idea of spirituality started in 1848 with the Fox sisters. The idea of materialism came in 1848 in the Communist Manifesto, the same year. And you go, hey, is that accident? These two completely opposed ideas both start at the same time, and they're fighting each other, and people are debating these things. The same as the nuclear chain reaction happened within a couple of months of the discovery of LSD. The two major events, this whole thing that the UFO is this connection to the nuclear weapons and stuff like that. And you start seeing that these things may not be accidental. The idea with computers, how much of computers were developed by LSD? How many people had these, and all these weird stories about the development of the computer and virtual reality software and all these kind of stuff, which I've written about in some of my books. And you start realizing that there may be these period plays. That's what Seth says, that we come in groups. And that's what Michael Newton, the Life Between Life stuff, says, that we have these soul groups, and we come in and we make agreements with each other to do certain things to raise the consciousness. And so we're doing this sort of thing. So if the aliens come in and tell you what's going on, it's like giving you the answers to the test. What's the point? You came through the river of forgetfulness for a reason, because it's not about the end result. That we're into America, we're into the West. It's like we want everything, and we want it yesterday. We want another car and another house, and we want more stuff and more stuff. And even UFOs and spirituality is like, all right, we got the 2 cars, we got the house, we got the kids have been through college. What do we want now? Hey, let's get some spiritual stuff. Let's add that. It's kind of a boring night. Let's go for a CE5. And it's like entertainment. And that's what Walker said. Admit it. You're just curious. It's like entertainment for people. And people have this short attention span. So the one theologian was Martin Luther, who started the Protestant religion, was asked in a seance. You see this crossover in a seance. Why does God not present himself? Like you were using the question, why does the aliens not present himself? Why does God not present himself? And he says, and his answer, whether it was true, this actually came through the seance, it was brilliant. He said, because doubt is the thing that moves the thing. If the spirit, if the soul, if the human being were to realize about the soul would develop wings and fly away and leave the body. And that's the whole thing. It's doubt. It's the doubt. It's it's about learning the lessons. It's not about getting the result. We think it's about getting disclosure. It's about what do you do? How do you getting disclosure? What lessons are you learning? Because that's our lesson. But for a lot of people, it's not the lesson of disclosure. We are like 1% of the population. With your relatives and your friends, nobody cares. It's like, you may be interested in this kind of stuff. It's not really. I'm more interested in who's going to win the football game on Sunday or whatever. People are trying to carry my kid to soccer practice. I got to make a living. This just doesn't. And the question is, are we in it by accident, or did we agree to do this thing? And in the UFO field, like Seth talks about the period place, in the UFO, we already know now in the UFO field, which I think is generally accepted, is this idea about the 3 waves, that there's these 3 waves that came into the world at this time to bring the UFO mystery to the world. And that we're all playing this role, and we're playing these things, and we're gradually raising the consciousness of the world to understand this thing, that we aren't alone, that there's more than the physical world and all this kind of stuff, and whatever is at the end result. And that's what I think is the answer to that question, that the phenomena is not here to do anything for us. In fact, they sabotage witnesses. Like you get this whole thing, like, I mean, we're from Mars, or we're from Zeta Reticuli, or we're from whatever. And then when you catch them, then they admit, no. But that's the whole thing. That's not what it's about. It's about getting you curious. It's about, why did I wake up with a triangle on my arm? Like, what happened last night? I'm going to set up a camera in my room, or what's going on? And that what we're doing by conversing like you and I are doing, and talking to thousands of people, is we're getting people to think about it. And the more they think, and the big thing that some of the people that are retired guys who are trying to push this story out, what you'll see is they're trying to do. And as I mentioned before show, I'm now involved in a documentary, and there's a lot of money going to go into this documentary. And I'm sort of like an advisor. I never want to be involved. I don't want to read the scripts. I don't want to do. I'll be an advisor. I'll tell you who these guys are, who the players are, and stuff like that. And that's what they want to do. So the government, I think, or not the government, the people who are behind it, like Jim Semivan said. So Jim Semivan, he gets all upset. He says, I'm furious. Like, they didn't ask my permission. And it's like, I'm still mad. Like 30 years later, I'm still pissed off about what they did to me and my wife and stuff like that. And it's like, well, if they hadn't abducted you, Jim, would you have gone to the 3-letter agencies and said to them, we're going to drop the UFO story? And he said, he went to the 3-letter agencies, the heads, and he said, you guys can't get this out. We are going to drop this. All these retired people, we're going to drop this. You can't get it out. We're not going to release classified material. We're going to drop the UFO disclosure. We're going to drop it. And then the 3-letter guys say, yeah, okay, go ahead and keep us informed. And so Jim Semivan and all these people are out there. And that's why they went after Tom DeLonge, because Tom DeLonge has the same thing as the thing I'm involved with. We have a guy who is able to do film, and they got money, and they're going to put money into this thing, and they're going to put these things, and it's going to be true, false. They're going to put this. And what happens is, when you get it on Netflix or whatever, or on your station or whatever, people will come and say, this is garbage. I'll have a good laugh. I'll watch this thing. And they don't realize they're being programmed. And the more they see it, the more they and that's what you're doing. You're using this subliminal thing, using movies and stuff like that to change the zeitgeist, putting stuff in movies like Bob Emenegger. I was telling you, there's the big debate about the Holloman Air Force Base film, where this guy claimed he had debunked it, and he was a totally different film. And you actually look at it, he's using a totally different film. And so I remember talking to Bob Emenegger, and he did this documentary for Bob, where the Pentagon comes, and the Pentagon, they were using, he was with Gray Advertising, which was always seen as a front company for the CIA. And he was vice president for Gray Advertising. He didn't know what was going on, but he gets this offer, and they're supposed to do this documentary. And he told me, and then his wife and him both denied it later, but said that the company that they were using had done a thing on the Vietnam War and they'd messed it up. And they got a real bad reaction. So they canned these guys, and they brought on Bob Amnager and Alan Sandler to do this UFO documentary in 1975. So they do this whole story about they're channeling an alien at the CIA with that Art Lundahl had given them all these stories, which were basically true, but they were sort of altered. And then the Holloman Air Force Base story. And then I said to Bob, Bob, it's kind of weird. I said, that story, Holloman, 1975 or 71, the UFOs land. There's 3 UFOs. They sit there, and then the 2 go away, and the 1 lands, and the aliens come out and they interact and stuff like that. I said, if it weren't for the location, and if it weren't for the time of day, that's exactly like Close Encounters of the Third Kind. And he said, oh, I didn't tell you. I said, no, you didn't tell me what? He said, I didn't tell you. I gave a copy to Steven Spielberg in 1975, and 77 was when Close Encounters came out. He said, no, you didn't tell me you gave a copy of the documentary to Steven Spielberg. He said, I told you. Annie Spielberg, his sister, worked for me. She was a line producer for me and Alan. And she said, Alan and Spielberg wanted a copy of the documentary. And you see, Close Encounters of the Third Kind is the Holloman Air Force Base story. And you start seeing how they do, or Chase Brandon, who wrote the book on how the CIA handled the Roswell, the Christos Conundrum, 2012. And he comes out and he tells the whole story. He says, I'm the guy who goes to CIA or goes to Hollywood. So if Sean, if you're doing a CIA movie at Hollywood, they come, hey, Sean, you ever been to the CIA? No. I'm from the CIA. Would you like to go to CIA? They'll give you an idea better how to do your movie, and we can show you how it works at the CIA. And what you do, instead of killing the guy, what you do is you manage it. You put stuff in the water. You move them in the direction you want to do, and they do it all the time. So that's how these guys get like Air Force jets and stuff in movies. They make these deals where they want you to put the CIA in a good light. So that was his job. 10 years he was in Hollywood, and he was to make sure that he tried to move guys. And sometimes he couldn't move them, but he would move them in the direction they wanted to go. So he writes the book, and then he says it's a fictional book. And I think he said at one point it was 8 times it went through review to check and take this out and stuff. And it was the old idea. If you're a CIA spy and you think you saved the world, you can tell your story. Sure. You just got to change the date, the names, all this kind of stuff. And you can tell this fictional version. So he takes the fictional version of how the CIA handled the Roswell crash. And he says in the one interview, he says, if you want a good read the book. If you want to learn something, read between the lines. And that's how they do it. They do this indirect telling of the story.
What happened to Chase Brandon? Like, where is he now?
Disappeared. He was supposed to do a book in 2014, and he just disappeared off the face of the earth. Nobody knows where he is. He was going to do a book on UFOs. He said he had another book coming out on UFOs, and boom, he just disappeared. But you see this over and over again. That's like Kit Green. Kit Green can openly talk about UFOs. Ron Pandolfi can openly talk about UFOs. They're both sort of retired. They're not really, and that's what you'll see is this whole idea that these guys retire. And Kit Green even, I think he told Dolan that when you have a security clearance when you're in the agency, and as soon as you retire, then they give you the real security clearance. Then you go with a contractor, and they tell you exactly what's going on. And that's what Jim Semivan, in the story I'd told with Jim Semivan. Jim Semivan had the experience. I was told this by a pretty authoritative source. He said he had the experience. And of course, the next morning he went into the CIA and he went to Ron Pandolfi. He said, I had this experience last night with these beings in my room. And he said, what the hell's going on? And Ron says, you don't have a need to know. And he said, what the hell do you mean? I don't have a need to know. You bring your boss's boss in here and we'll find out who doesn't have a need to know. And they bring in the CIA director into the room. And the CIA director says to Jim Semivan, according to the story I heard, is leave it alone. This will just ruin your career. Do not touch it. And what I heard is 2008, when he retired, Ron Pandolfi brought him in a room and gave him the briefing and told him what was going on. And that's the thing. So that's the game is if you're official, you can't really play the game, because that's the whole thing with the CIA. If you take a look at Ron Pandolfi in 1991, he deals with Dan Smith, who I think is a real cool guy. I'm trying to get a long interview with him because I think Dan has a lot of the keys. He's had all these thousands of conversations with Ron. And he said 1991, he's doing crop circles. And he goes in, and he's got a lot of money. So he goes into the States and he's dealing with people, and he gets told by a NASA guy, he said, I need to know about crop circles. Who in the United States would know? And he said, well, Ron Pandolfi. Give him Ron Pandolfi's phone number. He phones up Ron Pandolfi, and Ron talks to him. And then next thing, Ron phones him, and he says, I'm going to Los Alamos. and I'm going to go talk to the aliens. And he goes, you're what? You're going to talk to the alien? And then, so then he puts it on his podcast. He even told me this story. I got it from a couple of weeks. He tells exactly the same story. He said, yeah, he said, I put it on my blog. And that's his whole life. He writes his blog, everything that happens, everything. And, you know, he can't keep he's like me. He can't keep his mouth shut. So he writes in his blog. And then Ron comes back and he says, that just caused a real stir. He says, next time you write, do never put my CIA and me and Ron Pandolfi in the same sentence. And so then Dan says he goes, hey, this guy's CIA. CIA is a foreign intelligence agency. What the hell is he doing talking to me about UFOs? They're not into UFOs. So what Dan Smith does is he goes to the FBI and he reports Ron Pandolfi for, you know, breaking the law that he can't. And he's this good friend, you know, but he doesn't care. He's plays by the books. He goes and he reports Ron Pandolfi. And then the Inspector General does an investigation about what's Ron doing. Why is Ron talking to people about UFOs? If he's retired, that's one thing. But if he's a live agent and CIA, he's not allowed to be in the United States talking to people and influencing people. And so then, according to the story that Dan tells, that he says to the Inspector General, and they spent $100,000 on this investigation, according to Dan. He said, okay, I'll answer your questions, but I can't answer anything about UFOs. You don't have clearance. And apparently the end result was whatever Ron is doing, it's part of his job. Mm-hmm. And so for 20 years now, 30 years, I've been trying to figure out, I said, the biggest mystery in ufology is not what are UFOs? It's what the hell's Ron Pandolfi doing? Because he's still active and he's still playing the game. And anybody can contact him. He'll talk to you. And the rumor was, I think he even said it. Part of his job is to deal with the loons. So you and I are loons, and part of his job, whatever he's doing, is to deal with us and to, as he calls, obfuscate, to get you going in the wrong direction or to throw mud in the water or whatever. And it's just a bizarre type of thing. And I sometimes get really frustrated. I go, like I even said, because they were big into the portal thing. I said I don't deal with Ron, but I deal with everybody around him. What's Ron up to? And especially got Dan. Dan's had thousands of conversations with him. So I'll talk. And I was talking to one person. I said, yeah, I'm tired of this. I've had it with this. I'm going to get out of this. I was really interested in Ron because I think one of the major stories in the UFO thing is the portal. That's what John Alexander told Sid Goldberg from Gaia. He said, it's not about the UFOs. It's about the portals. And he got in his car and drove off. And it's the portal is the key thing, because it's this idea about what is real reality, about how do you move from one place to another in the universe, that there's not really a solid, there's no here and here, there's no time and space and all this kind of stuff. And so I said to this guy, I said, I'm tired. I said, I don't know. I was interested in Ron and what they're doing and stuff, and his wife and all the stories about his wife and stuff. I said, but I'm just tired of this. I think I'm going to take off, or should I stick around? And there's this pause, and he goes, "Nah, you should stick around." I go, "Okay." So I stick around. As nothing happens for 3 years or whatever. So suddenly I'm having a conversation with him about hockey. I'm not going to talk about UFOs. Never talk, because I know he's in a bad position. He's a friend with Ron, so I can't really use anything that he tells me. So I just sort of leave it. And he doesn't really talk to Ron about UFOs. He's an artist, and Pandolfi's wife is an artist. So, they do that and all sorts of fixing the car and, just friends and whatever. So I said to him, and he's talking. He said, that question you asked me a couple of years ago? I said, yeah. He says, it's real. I go, it is? It is? It's like, so it sort of drags me back in, but it can get really frustrating. It's like you just sort of throw your hands up. So what I do now is I just basically document everything. I'm supposed to have 2 disclosure books, and I keep thinking they're finished, they're sort of edited, I could put them up tonight, I could put them up, and I'm going, no, I won't. And one was written in 2018, and then it became so long, and then this latest event where they're doing the same thing again, and it's like a major operation. It's like I know all the names, I was involved in part of this thing, and I'm going like, oh shit, now I'm gonna have to do another book on this. And I was going to call it Drip Drip. The third book is going to be called Drip Drip, and the other one is called Beyond Managing Magic, because when I did the Managing Magic, and that's the whole key. Apparently, there was some interest inside the people who know what was going on with the term managing magic. And that's the whole thing this is not about UFOs, Sean. This is phenomenology. Believe me, this is the bottom line. They know the word in the intelligence community is phenomenology. It's all connected. It's all the same thing. And so that was the whole thing. So when I said managing magic, they thought this is fantastic, because that's what it is. It's like magic. How do you do this? And so they're looking at ports, and they're looking at hypnosis, and they're looking at everything under the sun, mediums and psychokinesis and stuff. And they're trying to figure out, like, how can we make a weapon out of this? That's the bottom line, is can we use this to screw the Russians around or whatever? And it's this game. It's whatever you're in. So it's like Danny Sheehan says, if you're a pickpocket meets a saint, all he sees is the saint's pockets. So it's whatever you're in. If you're a weapons guy, that's all you're going to see is the weapons. You're working, and you're not really interested in anything else. You're not interested in the spiritual component. You're trying to figure out, because that's your job. That's what you're getting paid for, is can we make water into a weapon? Can we make steel into a weapon? Everything can be a weapon, or it can help people. And so our role is to try to put the positive thing on why this is a positive thing, and what the phenomena I think is trying to get across. Because the latest thing what I sort of got turned off when I heard this evil alien thing again. I go, oh, got the evil alien thing. It's like, I know where they're going with this thing. But we've got to look at this thing. Why is the intelligence here? What are they actually doing? What is the message that they're trying to put across? And that's where you got to talk to the experiencers as to what is this all about. And it's not about them trying to help us get a weapon or destroy things. I think they're very neutral. They're raising it, but they realize that whatever you see, or whatever you use, you can use it for good or evil. But even if, and people get upset when I do this, I say, even if we destroy the world, it really doesn't matter, because you're still going to learn a lesson. We just build another world. It's all made out of consciousness. God does not create the heaven and the earth. God creates the sparks of the divine, and we're the ones that are creating the heavens and the earth. We're building it out of consciousness. And you'll see, if you go life between life stuff with Michael Newton, he talks to people between the lives and says, what are you doing? Oh, I'm making a rock. And then this person says, I'm making this little animal. And so that's all you can do. I'm just new at this. I can't do this. They're using energy to put together stuff to put on planets and stuff like that, that we're the ones that are creating this. And that's what we got to realize. We're manifesting this world. It's this very, very complex type of thing that we are doing, and there's a lot of people in on it, and I think it's a matter of time. We will, probably not in my lifetime, but we're going to get in a situation where it's not so much do we get the answer, because it's what Walker says, you're just curious. Admit it, you're just curious. We're worried about the answer. We shouldn't be worried about the answer. We should be worried about, what are we learning from this? What is the lessons that we're learning? How does that apply to our life? How does that apply to the fact that we're going to die someday? Because people sort of ignore it, and we say, well, we're into technology. And then someone comes to you, as they did to me twice, I've had that experience, where the doctor comes and says, you got a couple months to live. And you go, what the hell are you talking about? And then you're scrambling, trying to figure out what's going on. And that's what I think we should be trying to figure out, is how does this figure into why am I here? What is the nature of reality? And that's what I try to spend all my time on, is what is this teaching us? Is there time? Is there space? How are these beings? What are these beings? What's their message and stuff like that? And that's when you start looking at all sorts of other paranormal phenomena. And that's the book I did on this crossover book, where I called the big game, where you start looking at all the paranormal phenomena, and I tell stories that you've never heard before in all these different weird phenomena of how it crosses over. One fits into the other. And if you're an experiencer, it's like the idea, when I remember asking Yvonne Smith, I said, Yvonne, you do all these regressions of people. How many of these people have paranormal phenomena after they have their first UFO experience? And she starts laughing. She goes, and like 99%. And that's what you realize. Once you're down the rabbit hole, once you open that veil, it doesn't matter what you open, you start into ghosts, and suddenly you're getting Sasquatch, and you're getting UFOs, and you start getting downloads and stuff like that. And that's the whole thing, is it goes across. And that's the thing I'm trying to get across to people now. It's all the same thing. And it's this higher level of understanding how reality works. It's going to be 1,000 times more complex than what people think it is. People think it's just simple. We get this piece of metal and we can build a craft. And I'm going, seriously? You think because you got a piece of 83 levels of metal, give it? And I went to Hal Puthoff. I said, come on, Hal. They're dropping this stuff. Come on. This is a ports. They're just watching you go, what the hell's going on? Because no two pieces are the same as no two crafts are the same. There's no two pieces of metal are the same. Even Nolan had the two from the Uba Tuba thing, where two pieces from the same craft, and they were different. One had the isotopes all messed up, and the other one was normal. And that's the thing. They must be laughing. They're going, like, man, look at that guy. He's just like, he's going nuts trying to figure out this piece of metal. And we're picking these things up, and what they're doing is they're creating this awe and curiosity with metal, with ports, with abductions, with triangles on people's arms, with the UFOs keep changing. They change from this, they change to that, or they're the one now they have the jellyfish. And they're going, that is the most amazing thing I ever saw. And it's just like, yeah, they're just going to come up with
looks like a flying trash bag to me, but yeah.
that's what they're doing. They're just saying that, you know, once you think you got it figured out, then they're going to throw a curveball at you, and they're going to make it and say, no, this is. And I so many times over the last 50 years, I've seen things where I remember when I saw people doing light language for the first time. This friend of mine showed me this woman from Arizona where he goes golfing, and she's doing this thing, and I'm going, what is that? I said, I've never heard this before. And suddenly all these people started coming to me with light language. And I did this one Zoom thing with like 15 of these people. I said, okay, you do light language. And they're all doing these light languages from these different planets and stuff like that. And I'm going, there's no way this happened 50 years ago. It's just so weird. It's almost like they just add this thing. And that's what I call it, the Jesus circus. That's what the intelligence is doing. And the government has learned a little bit. The people who control the secret have learned that as well, is what you're trying to do is you're trying to put it out, but you're holding story back. You're not spilling the milk. You're telling the story and controlling the secret, because ultimately you want to destroy the Russians with it, or you don't want the Russians to destroy you with it, or it's worth money, or the patents and stuff. And so that's the way I look at it. But it's comes down to understanding that we play in what I call the Super Bowl. This is the biggest game of all times. If you realize what's actually going on here and the potential of what this actually is, you realize this is why we're here. This is what people are living lives of quiet desperation, have no clue why they're here until 3 months before they die, and they're trying to figure it out. We never figure it out. We live our whole lives trying to figure out why are we here, what's really going on, because it's all part of the same mystery. It's what is reality, why are we here, and what's life all about.
Now I got a question for you. This came from one of the subscribers.
Yeah.
When you were with Chris Bledsoe, and you've told the story before, so I'll ask you to repeat it, but the one question that I have about the story is, do you think they injured that dog on purpose? They being the beings that,
absolutely,
in order to show you.
Absolutely.
All right, tell the story. Tell the story so people know what we're talking about.
It's a theory. Wow, it's the same thing. Chris tells the story in his book, but he leaves out part. And I think it was written by a ghostwriter. So when I read the story, I go, nah, it's not really the way the story happened. The way it happened was I was at Citizens Hearing in Washington, and I was going to lecture in Florida for Paula Harris. Mm-hmm. So I got to rent a car out of Washington, and I'm driving down to Florida. So I'm going down the 15 highway, down this interstate, down the coast. And it goes like 2 miles from Chris's house. He's right off the 15. So I'd seen him in 2012. He was at an event called The Gathering, which was run by Larry Fascetta. He got a pile of money, and friends with Ron Pandolfi and lots of intelligence people and stuff like that. It was friends, bailed out Chris a few times and helped Chris and stuff like that. And so I met him at this gathering thing, and I really didn't talk to him. I talked to his wife. Everybody's talking to Chris. I didn't even know his story. I didn't know what his story was about. I just knew he was a pretty popular guy at this gathering thing. And his wife was talking about her kid singing and playing piano and stuff like that. And so I talked to the wife most of the time. So I figured, I sort of got his story, and I go, well, it's kind of an interesting story. So I said, Chris, can I stop by and see you on the way to Florida? He said, yeah, sure, come on. Very hospitable. So I go there, and then we had the common thing. We both like to go to McDonald's for coffee. So we go to McDonald's, and then he takes me to the Riverside, and I start to get this story. He starts telling me the story, and I'm at the Riverside where it happened, and he's showing me he tells me the whole story. And it was really complex. Like there was all sorts of different UFOs. There was like 15 UFOs the first night, and all these aliens running around the first night. There's only part of the story has been told. So he tells me this whole story. And then I stay there for, I think, about a day and a half. And then I got to make it to Florida for Friday. So I said, okay, Chris, I gotta go. We're sitting in his living room, and we're playing on Facebook or whatever. He's on his computer. I'm on my computer. And his wife had gone, and the kids were all gone, and we're by there ourselves. And he had put the dogs outside. So he's got 3 dogs. One was a Chihuahua. One was like a Heinz 57 medium-sized dog. And then Nellie, which is the one that got injured, was the big black lab. So they're outside, and then I'm sitting there, and I'm getting ready to go. And then he says, hey, what are you guys doing back in the house? And I look, and these 3 dogs are in the middle of the living room, and they're looking at him. And he goes, how'd you get back in the house? So we go to the front door, and the front door is wide open. So he puts the dogs outside, and then I talk to him a little bit. And I said, oh, Chris, I'm taking off. So I get in the car and I drive to Florida. I get to Florida, and he says to me, there's an email from me. And I go, you know what? It happened twice more after you left. He said, I went back in the house, and then I'm sitting there, and then suddenly the dogs are back in the house again. I went to the front door. The front door is wide open. Put the dogs outside. I went to the bathroom. I came out of the bathroom. The dogs are back in the house. Front door is wide open. And I go, you left the door open. I wasn't even, come on. It's just, you left the door open. So then I go back, and this is why I think they did on purpose. So it's like the intelligence, the aliens, I call them the intelligence. So the intelligence says, you don't think that was cool? You don't think that was impressive? Watch this. So what happens is I go there, and I had taken my camera out. I'm driving out the rent-a-car, and I got the camera out on the front seat. I don't know what I was photographing, but it was just exactly where it was supposed to be. Camera's on the front seat. I get out of the car, and then I'm photographing the burning tree. So I'm taking some more photographs of the burning tree. I'm taking photographs up inside the tree. I stick the camera up in the tree, and I'm trying to see up because the fire was coming out the top of the tree. So I'm trying to see if you could see light coming through and stuff like that. Anyway, I took a couple of photos. We walked to the back patio. There's a concrete patio on the back of the house. And we're standing there, and I'm not there more than 10 minutes, maybe 6-7 minutes I'm there. And I parked the car, I hadn't taken it out of the car yet. And then he says, so you want to go in the house? And I put the camera back in the car. And then he says, you want to go back in the house? I said, yeah, okay. So then we go, and he's on the right-hand side. I'm on his left-hand side. And the dog, you know how a dog wants to run in the house before you. Open the door, and the dog runs by me on my left-hand side. And all I hear is Chris saying, Nellie, what happened to you? And I look, and the dog is in the hallway going inside the door, and the blood is shooting out the dog's neck, up on the walls, and it's like an artery that he got hit, and it was shooting out. And the dog wasn't panicking. There's blood was shooting out the dog's neck. And then Chris is going, Nellie, what happened to you? And he grabs the dog and he pulls it back out the door onto these two stairs, concrete stairs down onto the patio. And then he's yelling, Chris, bring me a knife. I got to cut off the collar. And I'm going, this is weird. Like the first day when the dogs, the front door's wide open, I'm going, yeah, nothing. This time I go, this is weird. Run. I get the camera, and I'm sitting there, and Chris has got, now he's got the dog down onto the flat concrete patio down the stairs. And Chris comes out with a semi-automatic rifle. It's like he's going to take down Bin Laden or something. And I'm going, holy cow. And he says, I'm going to shoot that effing dog. And I said, there was no dog. She was right behind us. She was right behind us chewing on this gourd. Because Chris turned around. He said, what are you chewing on that gourd for? And he said, whatever. And then we turned around. So I know that the dog was. It was like maybe 3 feet behind me on the grass off this patio. And so Chris has got the dog there, and Chris Jr. comes out, and he's all upset. And I said, Chris, there was no dog. There's no dog. If the dog had gotten bitten by a dog, we would have known. And he said, well, I'm going to get the raccoon then. And I said, there's no raccoon. There's nothing. I guarantee you there's nothing. We were just here. And then so me and Chris just started going, and he cuts the collar off with the knife. And then he says, get me a rag. And I show Chris, we could see exactly where the blood started. It was right on the edge of the patio. There was a dandelion leaf and had a drop of blood. And then there was a couple of drops of blood, and then it went. And then I looked at my pants, and I had this sort of light colored blue jeans, and my pants were completely full of blood all the way down my pants. And so then he's got the rag on there, and then he lifts up the rag, and Nellie gets up, wags her tail, and she goes racing off. And I got my camera, and I chase after the dog around the house. She goes to the front door, past the front door. She barks at the front door, and then she heads off in the next door neighbor's yard as if she's chasing something. And then I'm sitting there, and then I realized I got all this blood on my pants. And so it was like, you weren't impressed with us letting the dogs out of the house. Watch this. So I was the center of attention. Like there was no blood on anything else. It was on my pants, up and down my pants. And I'm going, wow. So I take pictures of my pants, and I've got pictures of Nellie, and the rag is all full of blood, and Chris is holding it. And Chris said that's when he learned to heal. When that happened, he could heal people after that happened. And so the whole idea was, you're not impressed with this. And so me and Chris were having this sort of a debate after. Chris said, oh, that was the shadow people did it. Because everybody has the shadow people. That's one of the things. The shadow people show up, and they're in the attic, and they're moving around and through the walls, 2-dimensional. I said, do you see the shadow person with the hat? He said, oh, I saw that one. I said, yeah. Okay. It's like, why does a shadow person need to wear a hat? I mean, this is all
Hat Man. That's
with
the
this
Hat
whole,
Man, right?
well, and the Aboriginals
Yeah.
have it here and stuff like that. And the idea is like, why do you need a hat? It's all performance. The phenomena is performing for you. It's and so he says it's the shadow people. I said, fuck, I don't think it's the shadow people. And he said, well, yeah. I said, well, why would the shadow people cut the dog? And he said, well, they're evil. And I said, well, how do you know they're evil? And he said, well, because they're black. I said, because they're black doesn't mean they're evil. I said, you know what I think happened? And he said, what? I said, Warner Brothers is doing the movie. Warner Brothers wants to. They had asked for the signal, and the tree had burned. He prays, and he asked for the signal for Warner Brothers to do the movie, and the tree starts to burn. It has this bizarre tree experience, and so then I said, they want this in the movie. They want this bizarre one event after another happening and stuff like that. They just as bizarre as can be to raise consciousness that they want to do this. He said, no, I don't think so. And then a couple of weeks later, Chris phones me up. He says, you still got those photographs of Nellie? And I said, yeah, I still got them. He said, Warner Brothers would like to see them. I said, yeah, sure. So that's what I think it was. They wanted this in the movie, and it will be in the movie, because when I heard that what's his name wanted to do the movie, Mel Gibson wanted to do the movie. He was behind this.
Oh,
There was these two state guys, Chad and Kerry Hayes, were script writers for Warner Brothers, and they're the ones that asked for the signal. They're the ones that asked for and they were religious guys, and they wanted the signal and the tree burn and stuff like that. So then I heard that Mel Gibson wanted to play Chris Bledsoe in the movie. He was going to finance this thing, and they were going to spend $80 million. And that was big money back in 2013. They were going to spend $80 million, more than The Passion of the Christ. And they were going to make this major movie. And he was going to, and Julia Roberts was going to play Diane Pasulka. I said, Julia Roberts is going to play in the movie? And she said, yeah. And I said, so who's playing me? It's like, because I knew there was going to be it. And that's what they wanted, was these bizarre, and that's what they're doing, these bizarre events. And people watch the movie. It's the same as Diane Pasulka. That was the whole thing. She was the religious advisor to Conjuring 1 and 2, which did $1 billion. And that's why she was on this movie. And that's why she told the Warner Brothers people about Chris Bledsoe, because she was this religious advisor. And then when they saw the story, they said, wow, this is a fantastic story. And they wanted to do the story. And then what happened, I'll give Chris credit, because Chris turned it down. We had this meeting where we met Tim Taylor at this cabin. And this is all, Chris was at the center of this meeting. And my friend Mark Olson was there, and Mark Leon was there. And there was a bunch of people there. So we were there, and I remember Chris had gone twice to the lawyers, and he'd turned it down because Warner Brothers was going to pay him, 2% of gross, 4% of royalties, and $1.5 million to sign or whatever. And he said, no, I want control of the end of the movie. And they said, well, we can't give you control of the end of the movie. It doesn't work that way in Hollywood. And Chris had turned it down twice. So had the negotiation the third time. And remember, these big business guys in the cabin were saying, Chris, don't take royalties. Take all the money up front. It's $20 for a pencil. They're not going to make any money. And so they were advising him. And Chris didn't care about the money. He just wanted to control the end of the movie. And that fell apart. And then when Tom DeLonge got it, I won't say how much money, but Chris told me how much money Tom DeLonge offered to do this movie. Production money. It was like staggering. It was like, I said, that much money? And he said, yeah. But they wanted to put a reptilian at the end. They wanted to put, and Chris said, no reptilian going in the movie. So I give Chris credit. Chris stuck to his guns. He could have cashed out a long time ago. He never cashed out because he said he wanted it to be called The Message, because it was the woman that had come to him and said, Chris, you have a burden, the same as you and I have a burden. You have a burden, and it's yours to carry. And I said to Chris, do you know what the burden is? He said, yeah, the burden is the message. So that was what the movie was going to be called, The Message. It was about the message from the lady. It was not about reptilians and aliens and stuff like that. And he's gone where I've sort of gone now, where he said, no, I don't think this is extraterrestrial. I think this is much more complex than extraterrestrial. Mm-hmm. And that's where the idea where Tim Taylor comes in, and they find out he's in contact with a lady. And then they go and they give the briefing to the Pentagon about what the lady says. And then Tim Taylor supposedly goes to brief Obama, and then he gets this medal where he shows me this medal. And I said, it looks like a medal from the Olympics. So where'd you get that, Chris? He said, I can't tell you where I got it from. I can just tell you where it came from. And he goes to the next photograph, and there's a mailing envelope from Camp David. And I go, holy shit. And it's like, somebody's paying attention to this guy. And that was the whole deal, was this, the lady was the important thing. And Chris told me that all the intelligence agencies, when they heard about the lady, That's when everybody started paying attention that this was this divine feminine or whatever. I don't know what's going on. And Chris went into this idea that this is a spiritual thing, and I wasn't as much on board. Now I'm starting to see that this may be where this thing's going.
Now, what's the deal with Tim Taylor? Is he ever gonna go public? Like, what's he doing now? What's he up to?
Well, he's got 44 patents. He's gone into this cosmic club or the invisible college or whatever they call it. And it's like, we don't want to be public. But when I talked to him, the reason I used his name, everybody was using Tyler D. And I said, when I talked to him, he was not, there was no secret. He didn't say, keep my name secret or whatever. I didn't even know who the guy was. I mean, I always say, if I had known who this guy was in that cabin, I would have paid a lot more attention to what he was saying. I would have asked some questions. I didn't know who he was. All I know is he'd had this experience. And he'd had this download that he'd put on the space shuttle. He told me about how he couldn't get this thing on the space shuttle. And they were sort of telling him he's crazy. And it has to do with metal and tissue and stuff. And all this stuff is medical stuff. It's all positive type stuff that he's getting from these beings. And so when I had the meeting with him, he actually introduced me to an experiencer. And that's when I started to learn this idea that Tim was following these experiencers around. And he said, there's these two experiences. And the one woman, I can't remember, he phoned her and she wasn't home. And he said, there's this woman that I talked to that may live near you. She used to live near you. And I said, where? And he said, Steinbach, Manitoba. I said, that's like 30 miles out of my where I live. And I said, really? He said, yeah, you want to talk to her? I said, yeah, sure. So Tim gets on his phone and he phones up. He said, Connie, here's Grant. Do you want to talk to Grant? And I said, oh, Connie used to live in Canada. And I know this woman. I know her very well now. And I would talk to her and exactly what Tim did is what everybody else has to do. So I said, well, what are you doing? And he said, well, Tim, I keep these lists for him. So she has premonitions. She had premonitions so direct that she said it was like being on the internet 24/7. And she gave me some of these things that I actually tracked down and she started crying. There's an interview. I don't know if we'll ever release it, but she was kind of, she was crying when she had these things. One was a coal mine disaster where these 16 guys are underground in Utah or something like that. And they send in a team to rescue them. And there's another collapse and these 3 guys die. And then they call off the rescue. And she's down below with these guys who are still alive. And she's live with these people. And she's just horrible type stuff. And then she has the one with the train in China where these trains are on the same track. It's an elevated train track. And there's a mountain in the background she describes. And I find the Utah story and I find an actual picture of this train wreck where the train is hanging off the track. And there's the mountain in the background and the trains are on the same track and stuff like that. And so she had that, and she actually told the beings at one time, she said, I can't take it anymore. I can't do this anymore. And she said it stopped for a while. And then she said, okay, I'll go. So Tim was following this, and he was also following other paranormal events that she had. And she was just recording this stuff for Tim. So Tim had all these experiences, which is where I learned the idea that you got to follow these experiences and say, what experiences are you having, and start recording it, and you start seeing these parallels between other experiences. And that's where Tim's an experiencer, and so is Gary Nolan's experiencer, and Eric Davis is an experiencer, and Hal Puthoff's kid is an experiencer. Hal may be an experiencer, and you start realizing that that's how these people all get down the rabbit hole. Jacques Vallée is an experiencer, and you start to realize that this phenomena is picking people, and people have roles to play. And so Tim took his seriously. And but he never wants to be on the record, even though there's a book that he wrote and stuff like that. And he's just sort of disappeared off the map. I don't think he even talks to Dan Pasolka anymore. He just doesn't want to be sort of public. And I don't think he talks to Chris because Chris, like me, sort of told the story. So he's sort of been burned by, now he's out there, his name is out there and stuff like that. And he just sits in the background and does his thing. Same as all these other guys who are in this invisible college or whatever you want to call it. They're sitting in the background, they're gathering material, and they're never going to release it to anybody. There's no way, because it's all patents and it's about knowing more. And if you release what you've got, then you expose your sources and nobody's going to talk to you. And that's what they're really deathly afraid of, is everybody stopping to talk to them. Because they said these guys, whatever you want to think about them, evil, whatever, aviary or whatever, they're trying to figure it out as well. And then they meet each other and they say, oh, there's this Avery and there's all these other, well, then they talk to these people. You got a clearance? What did they tell you? And then, so Hal Puthoff and Kit Green and all these guys together. And that's what NIDS did. That's what Bigelow had money. So what does he do? He did a very smart thing. He brings in all the top people and picks their brain for thousands of dollars a day. And that's what you do. And that's what we've got to do, is we've got to go to these things and stay away from the conspiracy and the Illuminati, because they want the Illuminati. They want you to believe there's an Illuminati. They want you in France down some dark alley, because you're never going to find it. There is no Illuminati, and you're off the radar if you start looking for this. They use these distractions. So that's where you go to the experiencers and you start to learn these ideas that when I did the book with the sky pilot thing, that people see in 360 degrees, and that the thing is flown by consciousness. And now you got Jim Semivan coming saying they know this, that the consciousness is a part of this thing. And Lakatsky says the technology is part psychic and it's part physical. And so it's substantiated what I've got out of these people, but I got it from these people, and they all synchronistically turned. I remember the first woman that told me that she'd flown the craft, and she was in her 70s when I talked to her, and I'm thinking, oh, come on. All I can think about is Saudi Arabian women that couldn't drive cars. I'm going, really? Don't you fly the craft? I was like, it's going to throw her out of the house. And then all these people started showing up to me. And so we're learning these components that we didn't know. This idea about the psychic component to the thing. The craft is bigger on the inside. You can see in 360 degrees, and these parallels to all these other paranormal phenomena. And so I think we're making pretty good headway. I think we've moved a lot just since 2017. We've got a lot of young people that have come in that weren't there before. I call them the young guns, where they come in, they know how to use computers, they know how to search, stuff like that. It's increased substantially since 2017. We always get upset because we want it tomorrow, and we don't realize these things take a while. That I sat there from 1975 to 2017, and basically nothing happened. 2017, it just erupted, and it's spiraling down, and we're mad because we won't get disclosure in the next hearing or whatever. But we didn't have a hearing until the last year, 2 years ago. There was no hearings. You didn't even think about the fact they'd have a hearing. They wouldn't even admit that UFOs existed, that there was such a thing. And look where we've gone now. So people can get a little bit overwrought with the idea, like the Western idea. We want everything, we want it yesterday, and we get sort of spoiled, and we think that it should be handed to us. And it's about, can you work it for yourself? Can you figure it out? Quit waiting for the government to hand you something. Do it yourself. We have the problem in the UFO field, as I've always said, we're the Rodney Dangerfield of science. Everybody's embarrassed. Nobody wants to be, there. And so when some PhD comes forward and says, I want to talk about UFOs, it doesn't matter. You can say the stupidest thing in the world. It's like, he's a PhD. He's talking about UFOs. Let's put him on our podcast. Or this guy's a whistleblower. And we're so desperate. We're trying to get, and what's going to happen is, in 2017, when New York Times came forward, what you're going to get is a situation where Lakatsky has already said, we've got a craft, we've been inside it. You're going to get a situation where
and nobody reacted to it. Nobody reacted to it when he said
government official is going to come forward and say psychic component is part of the UFO mystery. It's going to be an official statement out of the New York Times or somewhere, and that's going to change everything. Once the psychic component, the idea that this is not totally physical, comes, the whole world changes. That's, I think, is the big thing. And it's going to be like the 2017 thing. It's just going to flip, and everybody's going to go, oh, okay. And we're going to make a great stride forward. We're just waiting for somebody in the government to confirm this psychic component, the fact that they understand this.
I mean, with the leak of remote viewing, we've kind of known this for 25, 30
but it's still
years,
denied.
Whatever.
You don't have an official government statement. Right. What you need is like the Rodney Dangerfield thing. You need the New York Times to say it's real, the Washington Post to say it's real, or you need an official government statement to say, yeah, those are our videos. Yeah, this is real. We're doing an investigation. Then it just flips. Then everybody goes, yeah, okay, I know that. And then everybody all the skeptics, you have a couple of guys you're still hanging on and making stories and, about, what they think is going on or whatever. But it's basically they're left in dust. Then everybody just moves ahead. And the next big one, I believe, is this psychic component. Or maybe even the crafts. We've got crafts, but the crafts is still nuts and bolts type stuff. That, I think everybody sort of generally accepts that now. It's that psychic component, the idea that it's not the physical world you think it is. That's the bottom line of this UFO thing.
Is this related to some of the work you were doing with this documentary that might come out? Is it related to that, or is that separate?
Well, that's another just a drop. It's like what I've always maintained. When I wrote the first book, UFOs, Area 51 and Government Informants, I said that there was this drip thing, that there are people, former retired guys, there are people inside the government. There's people inside the government who want it covered up, and there are people inside the government who want it out. So there's this drip thing. where back in 1956 there was Air Force guys who were advisors to the movie the UFO in 1956. There was people who fed stuff to Walt Disney to do a documentary to raise the consciousness. Bob Emenegger, Bill Moore, and part of this whole thing now is about Bill Moore. This latest thing is a spinoff from Bill Moore. Some of the people that were involved with Bill Moore, and Bill Moore was given stuff, and he put stuff out. And then you had Tom DeLonge, and I said to this latest guy, I said, "Hey, you're the new Tom DeLonge," and that's what they said. That's what part of the discussion was. You have what we want. And you got to realize this, the government doesn't do films. They don't have a film production. They need film guys to do film stuff. So when they find somebody who's ready to say, I believe you, I'm ready to do your documentary, they go, oh, okay. And that's what's going on. They're going to do it again. And they've done it over and over again. And it's going to be plausible deniability. We're not going to prove this. It's going to be, when I heard the evil alien thing, I go, oh shit, it's going to be this, true, false, and it's just going to be raise the consciousness a little bit more. Expose some names, and it's all because they can walk away from it. Same as the aliens can walk away from it as well. That's why they don't disclose. They do all this kind of stuff, and then they sabotage their witnesses and they walk away. It's not about getting the end result. It's about sort of getting people to think and to move people along. I think the intelligence and whoever these retired people inside the government who want it out are doing is to just move it, not to disclose it. The government, I don't think, knows. The intelligence knows, because what you get is this phenomena that when you look at experiences, you see that 40% of all experiencers say at one point during their experience, they knew the answer to everything in the universe. 31% of people inside a near-death experience say at one point in their experience, they knew the answer to everything in the universe. I've had that experience in psychedelics. That is a real experience where you suddenly, know everything, and then it fades away. So I'm going to remember this, and it just fades away. So the intelligence will know the answer to everything in the universe, which is what I say is when you die, you will instantly know the answer to everything in the universe. And when you go to your next life, you'll go back to the river of forgetfulness and pretend that you didn't know anything. And so I say, you got to realize that your life now, Sean, is a dream. When you die, you're going to realize I was just a puppet on a stage. That was just a dream. And in your next lifetime, this lifetime is going to be a forgotten dream. So don't get hung up on being the puppet. You got to realize who you actually are, that you are not the puppet on the stage. You are this other entity that's coming in and trying to move the consciousness, trying to do something, that we're here for a reason. We're not here randomly. And so it comes down to, why am I here? What am I supposed to be doing? Am I doing it? And when I leave, they only ask you one question. According to Michael Newton, 7,000 people that he regressed, only one question: how did it work out? And everybody says the same thing. Oh, I could have done better. I forgot to do this. I was going to do that. I chickened out. And it's like, oh, okay, good. And go on. And there's no right, there's no wrong. And everybody's playing their little role. And so it's to figure out, what am I here to do? And am I doing it? And what everybody does is totally irrelevant.
Now, going back to Tim Taylor, I can't let it go. All right, so the other thing with Tim Taylor, he mentions going into some room at NASA that only certain people go in. What is that like? Do you know anything more about what was related
I didn't know who he was I didn't know who he was when I talked. I thought there's something in the room that helps him think. He doesn't go in the room; it's in the next room beside him. I don't know if they go in it, but that gives you the indication that they have some knowledge. Like Tim knows the protocols, and the thing with the most impressive story I heard that he told was the story that he tells with the kids, where he takes the kids, Chris's kids, and the girlfriend, Chris's girlfriend, and Yvonne, Chris's wife, and they all have this piece of metal. He takes this piece of metal in one hand, and then he puts the piece of metal in the other hand, and they react. And Chris actually goes, like, he basically blacks out. He gets such a reaction from this sort of stuff. And that's when Tim Taylor says, why you? And what it was if you've been face to face with an entity, you will react to this thing. And the girlfriend didn't react. So Chris's girlfriend, I think there was no reaction, but everybody in the Bledsoe family reacted. So you see that kind of stuff, and you realize they have something. So they understand this idea about the metals. Or my friend that took Tim to the gifting field. Now there's just some debate about whether it's the same gifting field, but my friend Mark Olson takes Tim. He's at a conference, the UFO Congress, and he meets Tim there, and then he takes him to this field. And he said that now he's saying he doesn't remember what Tim said, but I recall that he said that when Tim saw the medal, he said, "This is the real deal," and he got all excited about this. This is real stuff. And so he's doing this stuff on the metals and stuff. But again, it's like Tim is filing patents, so he's making money out of it. Plus, he's got a security clearance, and you can't expect these people to do security clearance. That's why I said Burchett. It's this phony thing where it's like these congressmen are saying we want this out on the table, and then okay, you were in a briefing. What did they tell you? Oh, I can't talk. It's security. It's like,
well, that's how they get you. That's how they get you. They tell you what you want to know, and then because they pulled you into a skit.
But if you want this guy to break a security clearance, then own up and break the security clearance yourself. You're expecting these guys to go and break their security clearances because these people they basically have security clearances and they're gone if they get exposed and say something. It's what they called intelligence blowback. That's when one of the stories I leaked, I was told now we have to wait for the intelligence blowback to see whether somebody's going to lose their job and lose their security clearance because the guy above them, like Elizondo. So Elizondo said, I can't talk about this, which means there's somebody above Elizondo who's watching what Elizondo is saying. And if he steps over the line, so there are people who have certain things, but Elizondo is being told, tell him this, tell him that. And it's this gradual sort of thing. And everybody's playing this sort of game. And that's why I called the third book called Drip Drip. Because as soon as I heard what was going on, I was helping set this thing up. And I go, this is the same thing as this drip drip thing. It's like slowly release it. The intelligence is slowly releasing it. And so is the government slowly releasing it. It's like they're moving us along and enjoy the ride and do what you can to move the ball down the field because we're all, I think, part of this game. And it doesn't matter if we figure it out today or tomorrow or whatever. It's the ride that's the important thing.
Are you familiar with the novella Chains of the Sea?
No. Never heard
Okay, so this is the book that Lou Elizondo, not book, but novella that Lou Elizondo mentioned. It's written by Gardner Doujou, who was a science fiction writer.
Yeah.
But apparently someone had recommended it to Lou, and Lou said that that's a good representation of kind of the nature of reality. And the interesting thing about that story is it involves the landing of some alien intelligence, some ETs, in 3 places, like Venezuela, Delaware, and Ohio. And the entities completely ignore humanity. But this AI that both this is written in 1973, something like that, is in communication with both the Soviets and at the time, right, and the United States. They have these advanced AI. So it's able to interface with the AI. And the AI learns that all this paranormal phenomena, cryptids, etc., were actually non-human intelligences that actually were the ones in charge. Humanity was kind of just a lower tier organism. And in fact, it was beneath the notice of these ETs that had landed. And kind of the dilemma of the story is that there's some new treaty between these NHIs, and humanity kind of loses out on the deal. So whenever Lou says somber, it's kind of, I think, this view that we're not at the top of the food chain.
Yeah,
anyway, what do you make of that?
That goes back to the evil alien thing, which I have grave reservations. If you're talking military guys, it's always the evil alien thing where, they're a threat. And it's like even the idea of ETs, or it's all a game. It's all us creating reality. That they, as they told my friend Yossi Ronan, who wrote the book One, my Israeli experiencer, he said he was told by these green beings, when we come into your world, we take on a body. We can take on whatever body we want. We don't have to use a body, but we have to in order to operate in your world. You can do the same thing. You don't realize it. And that's this idea. There may not be any time and space. There may not be any as John Wheeler said, the intellectual successor to Einstein at Princeton. There is no out there. This is a participatory universe. The idea, it's all within your head. It's all ooly stuff. It's all consciousness stuff. And that's where we make these we get down these road about, aliens coming from other planets. And we keep slipping back into the illusion all the time, when the idea is that it may all be creations where they're playing a game, we're playing a game, we agreed to play this game with them. It's all ooly stuff. It's all consciousness. That's where the beings say, when you can interpret, when you can see within your head where you want to go, when you can imagine it. They told the one woman, 2 women that were on board, when you can imagine it in your head, push the button, and said, boom, we're on the other side of the galaxy. instantaneously on the other side of the universe. It was unbelievable. And it's like instantaneous. So if Ron Johnson goes 50,000 light years and these two women go on the other side of the universe instantaneously, is there time and space? Something seriously wrong with our interpretation of time and space, that it may be all impressions, all in your head. It's all a dream where you can, you have these people who have this latest book that I just blew me away. This thing with comas, people put into these induced comas who almost like the people with the DMT, where they say, I was gone for 2,500 years. I lived all these lives. I built this forest on a mountain and stuff like that. I was there for 2,500 years, and they were gone 10 minutes. That's that's the kind of universe I think we're in, where it's so different than people think it is. That we think that there's even the idea of AI. There's going to be AI, but it's always going to be the same thing. It's going to be biological. There is no the Tao Te Ching, the smallest religious book of all time, said the Tao that can be named is not the Tao. The name that can be named is not the eternal name. The Tao is the beginning of heaven and earth. The Tao is the mother of 10,000 things. When you name it, it's wrong. The Tao that can be named, what we do in science, it's all a verb. It's all consciousness. It's all spiritual. When you name it, that's what we do in science. We put names on it. We say it's inanimate. There's big objects and little objects, and the big objects go on top of the little objects and stuff like that. When you name it, you're immediately wrong. It's all conscious, it's all alive, and it's all connected. And that's what we got to remember. It's this consciousness thing where there may not be any physical stuff at all. You break all the physical stuff down, it comes down to energy. And we've learned that through quantum physics, that the quantum physics is going the way of the UFO. That it's the same sort of world. Now they've come in at the bottom of the ninth inning and they said, oh, it may be a simulated universe. It's like, we've been talking about this for 100 years in the the UFO spiritual world, and they've come in and suddenly, because some scientist says now it's legitimate. It's like, oh yeah, it'll be this illusion type thing. But the UFO stuff, that's been going on for a long time. So you can see science.
Well, the concept of Maya has been around for thousands of years. Right?
Yeah. And you see, that's the thing. The way they got it is through meditation. That the idea is that you can get into the field. All the answers are in the field. UFO experiencers will say, at one point during my experience, I knew the answer to everything in the universe. It's all in the field. It's the ability to shut down the rational, analytical left brain, the default mode network, and get in the field. And some people can get in the field a little bit, and some people can shut it right down, whatever their method is. And those are the people you got to listen to. And people who are on the UFO abduction type thing, they'll tell you it's a different time and space. It's a different vibration. They're not in this world anymore. They're in this other side. And therefore what they say is extremely important. And we've got to listen to those people and realize that the world is not the way we think it is. And that's what they're doing. That's why I say they're doing the theory of wow. They're doing stuff like a classroom in another planet where the grade one class, they say, oh, got this planet here, and we got to get an idea. How should we do this? And the grade one says, hey, let's put some lights on crafts and fly them around. Like, why do UFOs have lights on them? So you can see them. They don't need lights. They're doing that on purpose. And then the grade two class says, oh, wow, we should do crop circles. Oh, that's a good idea. We'll do crop circles. And then the grade three class says, oh, let's do abductions. And the grade four class says, let's do cattle mutilations to talk about the nuclear weapons downwind and downstream from stuff. And it's all a game, or they're doing this sort of game, and we're all part of this game, and it's just to raise consciousness. And in the end, you realize it's a dream. Oh, I was playing this game. These guys, oh, I know who these guys are now. I know who these guys are. We all played this game, and did we do good to raise consciousness? And then people will say, I'm going to get off the karmic wheel. And I would say, what do you mean you're going to get off? How many billionaires do you think you can sit on the beach in Hawaii and drink Mai Tais? Come on. You go back again. You say, okay, what are we going to do next? Oh, let's go and go to this planet. Let's raise consciousness here. Let's make because what it is it's a loop. If it's made out of consciousness, we're creating the heavens and the earth. So the earth gets more, the universe gets more complex. We feed it in and it loops out, and we get it and we feed it in, and it gets more complex and bigger and more grand. And that's what's happening. We're just making this universe, and it's all ooly stuff. There's no beginning, there's no end. And that's what I think the intelligence is indirectly telling us as it goes along. It's trying to shatter our naive reality. We think it's made out of nuts and bolts. It's inanimate. There's nothing beyond random chance and stuff like that. And you go, no. And that comes down to, if there's paranormal phenomena, these people are telling the truth about paranormal phenomena, there's something wrong with our theories. It would not be happening if our theories are right. There's something, that's what Gary Nolan said. That's where the Nobel Prizes come. You go after the paranormal phenomena, and that's where you're going to get the Nobel Prizes from.
I agree. So we still have about 5 minutes or so, 6 minutes. And what can people do? Well, two questions. The first question is, what can people do to kind of participate in trying to learn more about this phenomena and just experiencing for their own what the greater reality might be?
Well, if they're tapped into, what we are, I think it's less random. That you've got to figure out, why are you seeing something? That I don't think it's that random where people get into the UFO field and they'll say to me, I don't think I'm really involved. I have a couple of dreams about aliens. And I say, anything else weird happened in your life? Go, oh yeah, and they start telling you all these weird stories and stuff. That people have to figure out, what is my role, and be open to when something comes out. And yet in the end, it's all going to happen at the right time. So there's this idea that you're only going to see something when you resonate with it. This idea of resonance, this idea that people have this idea, I'm divine, I've got it figured out, you don't have it figured out. And this channeled idea, whereas, what you put into darkness, that same thing that you put into darkness, separate from the divine and put into darkness, that same thing or person will drag you into the darkness with it. What you damn damns you back. What you bless blesses you in your return. To say I'm divine, that I have the answer and you do not, is the shadow pretending to be the light. So when you resonate with it, so people will say, oh, I have this bad experience where you have your experience, that whatever you're resonating at is where you do your lessons. So people will say, well, I have these evil aliens that are after me or whatever. You can only encounter the evil aliens if you resonate at their level. And that's this idea that you can say, oh, I'm going to go to heaven. I'm not going to be here anymore. I'm going to go with the angels in heaven. And heaven says, no, you're not. You don't resonate at our level. You can't be up here. And the same thing with it, like if you're doing on a Ouija board, if you go down and resonate at that level, you're going to pick up lower entities. But if you control your thought, it's whatever you're resonating with. So that's where I think that the experiences you have, like I know that with psychedelics, I had 5 very sort of fearful, hellish life experiences in psychedelics. And that's where I did 28 high dose sessions. And 5 of them, I had these very traumatic periods. And what I learned from there was I was in it, and then I just surrendered. I said, okay, this is hell. I'm going to live in this forever. And they made you believe this was going to happen forever. This is the way it's going to be. And like that was gone instantaneously. And then, so that's what I put at the beginning of the book. Surrender is the rule. Believe me, surrender is the only rule. And it's this idea that you let yourself go, that, and then the synchronicities start happening. Once you get into that, the resonance and the positive idea, then the guests start coming to you and all this stuff starts happening. And when you're having synchronicities, then you realize you're on the right path. And the idea, live life to your highest expectation with no expectation of a result. And that's what you do. And every moment you do, what's the most exciting thing I can do? And you just stick to that and believe that it's going to happen, and don't have any expectation that we got to have disclosure tomorrow, and the synchronicities will start happening. And my whole life is synchronicities. The book Tuned In was given to me by Chris Bledsoe. The 2 Shasta books was given to me by a phone call about Antarel telling me coming to the mountain. I've had the Apport book was an interview that had been done that announced that there was an Apport collection at the University of Manitoba. And I went, what? That's where I worked for 40 years. And my whole life, all my books are synchronicities. Almost every single book, I can tell you, there's some event that happened that said, nope, you got to go down this road, get going. And then like the one with the sky pilots, there's nothing online about sky pilots. These people all came to me. It was like they all were showing up and telling me these stories, and it's like, this is so weird. And I would look on the internet, I couldn't find anything on the internet, but these people all came to me. I had 36 people, and I figured like it was synchronicity. So that's what you do, is you live life to your highest expectation with no anticipation of the result, and the synchronicities will happen, and you will go where you're supposed to go. Your higher self will tell you. It's getting your left brain, your rational analytical, questioning things and trying to analyze things. everything that you perceive, everything that the left brain comes up with, flat earth and sun going around the earth, almost everything is going to turn out to be wrong. That you've got to get away from that and go to this idea of waiting for the idea to come and then acting on stuff and believing that it's not random, that maybe you take personal responsibility. Whatever happens to me, maybe I chose to do this, and whether it's happened or not, you're going to have a better result, because everybody knows that until you take responsibility for whatever's going on with you, you're never going to get cured. You're never going to move down the road. So assume that stuff is happening to you and you play with it. And in the end, as these people, I did this interview with all these different people. I've got a whole chapter on all these different people who had this experience. Everything's perfect. Everything is going to work out exactly the way it's supposed to be. Quit worrying about what's going on and realize that you are here for a reason, and that you've got guidance, and nothing you can do is wrong. Just take it as it comes and go from there, I guess.
All right, Grant, I appreciate you, and thank you for coming on the Through a Glass Darkly radio show on United Public Radio. So
yeah, hopefully we raise consciousness a little bit, because a lot of people will go, really? And they'll doubt it, but it'll be in the back of their mind. And then somebody else will say something. Every drop we put into the glass makes the water higher.
I totally agree. Thank you very much, my friend. And thank you everyone for listening and watching. Talk soon.
Beautiful.